There are 3 rules for staying alive in the Empire. Never spit in the well you drink from. Never argue with a Templar. And never, under any circumstances, let Duchess Eliza von Blutrose learn your name. They call her the Blood Rose. She buys pretty commoners the way other nobles buy hunting dogs, and for the same reason. Practice targets. Things leave her manor in bags, and the bags are black. So guess who my father lost at cards? My name is Leon Vance, I am 21, and I am chained to a chair in a stone room under her castle with my shirt gone and my trousers in what the guards called condition suitable for the procedure. And I heard heels in the corridor, slow ones, the walk of a woman who has never had to be anywhere on time. The door opened, and I have lied about this part every time I have told it since. I made a sound. It was not a manly sound. Silver hair tied back the way you tie it back when you mean to use your hands. Black leather from throat to boot. Red eyes that found me and did not look at anything else. And a whip. Long, heavy, dark at the tip in a way leather is not supposed to be. So I did what any proud son of the Empire would do. I shut my eyes and screamed, "Not the face. I am begging you. Anything else. I have to look presentable at my own funeral." Then I heard the whip hit the floor, and what came closer after that was not footsteps. A weight settled onto my lap. 2 hands took my shoulders. She put her nose against the side of my throat and breathed in, the way you check whether the wine is the vintage you paid for. Finally. 10 years. 10 years I have waited for you to grow into yourself, my Leon. My brain was screaming one sentence on a loop. She is checking whether the meat is fresh. She ran one cold finger down the middle of my chest and kept going, in a direction that ended around my belt. You are so tense. You need to be relaxed. I prepared something. The bottle out of all that leather was small, and the liquid in it was pink. They say, she went on, in the voice of a woman reading a laundry list, that it makes the body shake all night while the mind begs for mercy. Paralysis draft. I opened my mouth to make a final legal argument, and she took the opening, took my jaw in one hand, put her mouth on mine, and poured the whole bottle down my throat. I waited for my organs to dissolve. Instead, every ache I had collected in 21 years of being poor simply stopped. What was that? Elixir of immortality. High grade. That is a fairy tale. It costs 3 kingdoms. It is a very expensive fairy tale. Put a price in front of me and my mouth keeps moving without me. 3 kingdoms. For a farm boy. For your health. She moved a piece of hair out of my eyes, the way people do a thing they have imagined doing. You have to survive everything I intend to do to you. Then she snapped her fingers. Every torch caught at once and I saw where I was. Not a torture chamber. A shrine. Floor to ceiling, in frames and glass, in careful rows with careful little labels. Me at 15, asleep on a grain sack. Me in a wash house, wearing nothing at all, and I am still working out who stood close enough to catch that one. And in the middle of the room, under a dome of glass with a lamp burning under it, a handkerchief. Gray. Frayed. Filthy, the permanent way cloth gets when blood has dried in it. I knew it instantly, the way you know your own handwriting, and I had not thought about it in 10 years. You stopped, she said at my shoulder. Everyone that morning walked around me. You stopped, and you asked. And you did not ask whose blood it was. Whose blood was it? Mine, mostly. Some of it was not, my lady. I am going to ask a practical question and I would like a practical answer, because I have had a very unusual morning. Ask. What am I for? And she smiled. It was small, it did not reach anywhere near those red eyes, and it is the most frightening thing I have ever seen. You are here to marry me, said the Blood Rose. Then she walked to the door and turned the key, and the lock closed with a sound I felt in my teeth. And you are not leaving this room until we have an heir. Let me describe my thought process, because I am proud of it. A normal man would have screamed. A normal man would have pulled at the chain. A normal man, in a locked room with a beautiful lunatic who has just announced a breeding program, would have panicked. So I did not scream. I looked at the lock, and I looked at the shrine, and I looked at the woman who had just spent 3 kingdoms on my digestion, and I asked myself the only useful question available. Why is she in a hurry? 2 questions, I said. She stopped with her hand still on the key. 2, she agreed. Where is the paper? Which paper? One my father signed. If I am your property, my lady, then there is a document, and the document has a number on it, and I want to see the number. She held my eyes for a good deal longer than the question needed. Something moved across her face that I could not read at the time. Much later I learned what it was, and it was not what I would have guessed. She went to a cabinet in the wall, opened it without a key, and came back with a strip of paper the size of my hand. She held it up in front of my face and let me read it. My father's signature. My name. The transfer of all debts and obligations of the person named. And the sum. 900 crowns. I want you to understand something about 900 crowns. A good horse is 1,000. A bad house is 6. My father sold 21 years of a human being for slightly more than a house nobody wanted. 900, I said. 900, she said. That is insulting. It was his price. Not mine. Something in her voice went very cold and very quiet, and for the first time it was not aimed at me. I would have paid more. He did not know how to ask. Second question. Ask. Do you know imperial marriage law? She tilted her head. Just slightly. Like a hawk that has heard something in the grass. Say what you mean, Leon. So I said it, and I said it slowly, because it was the only card I had and I wanted to play it properly. A noble of the empire may marry a commoner. It happens twice a generation and everyone complains for a year. But a noble of the empire cannot marry a chattel. Property cannot consent. Property cannot sign. A marriage contracted with a person held as property is void from the hour it is spoken, and any child of it inherits nothing. I let that sit. You bought me, my lady. And the moment you bought me, you made it legally impossible to marry me. You spent 900 crowns to lock yourself out of the only door you wanted. Would like to say I was calm. I was not calm. My hands were shaking against the arms of the chair and I could hear my own heart. But I had her. I could see it. For one clean second, in a room built out of 10 years of watching me, I had the blood rose beaten on her own ground. She looked at me. And then she started to laugh. It was quiet and low and it went on much longer than I was comfortable with. You are wonderful, she said. I hoped you would be. I could not be certain. People change badly. She went back to the cabinet. She opened a second drawer, and took out a second document, and this one was not a strip of paper. This one was heavy parchment with a seal on it the size of my palm. She unrolled it and held it up. Manumission. Full and unconditional. Granting to Leon, son of Corvin, of Vance Mill Town, the free status of an imperial subject, with all rights of person, property, and consent. Sealed by the imperial registry. Witnessed by 3 magistrates. Dated 10 years ago. 10 years. Not last week. Not this morning. The same season as the handkerchief. I have never owned you, she said. I bought a debt and I burned it the same day. You have been a freeman since you were 11 years old and you have simply never had the paperwork. I read it 3 times. The date did not change. Then why is there a chain on me? I said. She looked down at the chain like she had genuinely forgotten it was there, which I later learned was true, and which tells you a great deal about how her mind is organized. He crouched, took the cuff in one hand, and it came apart. She did not use a key. She used 2 fingers and a small unpleasant sound, and I made a note never to make her angry in a confined space. Then she stood, walked to the door, and turned the key back the other way. She pulled it open. Cold air came in off the stairs. Real air, from outside, with rain in it. Go on, then, said the blood rose. I did not move. Go on, she said again. That door has not been locked in 3 days, Leon. I locked it 4 minutes ago because I wanted to see your face. That was greedy of me and I am not sorry. You are letting me leave. I have always been letting you leave. It is the only thing I have ever been able to give you that you would actually accept. She stepped aside. Would like you to go out through the front. Down the stairs, through the hall, out into the courtyard. Not the servant's way. I want you to see it. See what? The price of the door, she said. And that, right there, is the exact moment I should have known I was in trouble, because that is not how a captor talks. That is how a person talks when they are holding 4 cards and letting you look at one. I went. Of course I went. There was rain outside and my shirt was somewhere in a guardroom and I did not care. I went up the stairs and across a hall the size of a church, past a housekeeper with gray hair and a face like a closed ledger who did not look at me once, and I put my shoulder into the front doors and shoved them open. And I stopped on the top step, because the courtyard was not empty. There were 3 men standing under the gatehouse arch, out of the rain. 2 of them I did not know. Both wore traveling coats and both had that particular stillness that expensive hired men have. The third one was my father. He had a strip of paper in his hand. He was holding it up, at chest height, the way you hold a card you want the table to see. He was doing it again. In the courtyard of the woman who had already bought me, in the rain, at whatever hour of the morning that was, my father was selling me for the second time that week. "Ah, there he is," said Corvin Vance, and he actually smiled at me. He actually looked pleased to see me. "Leon. Come here, boy, you are making these gentlemen wait." I stood on the step in the rain in half a pair of trousers and could not make a single sound. "There is a difficulty," said one of the coats, patiently, to my father. "The debt was transferred. Your claim is stale." "The debt of the person," said my father, "not the person." "Read it again. My son is not in the Blutrose registry. He is not a servant here, he is not a bondsman here. Legally the boy is loose in the world, and a loose thing belongs to whoever holds the older paper." He was right. That is what I could not get past. Standing in the rain, listening to my father argue property law about my body, the thing that went through me was not grief and it was not rage. It was the cold professional recognition that his argument was good. "How old is your paper?" the other coat asked. 15 years, said my father. 15. I was 6 years old 15 years ago. "You sold me twice," I said. My voice came out wrong. Thin. "You sold me twice." 3 times, said Eliza von Blutrose. She had come up behind me. She had not made a sound doing it, and I did not jump, because some part of me had been waiting for her. "Once when you were 6, to men who do not give their names. Once when you were 14, to a house in the south that went bankrupt before they could collect. And once this week, to me, for 900 crowns. She was not looking at me. She was looking at the 3 men in the gatehouse, and the 2 hired coats were looking back at her with the specific expression of professionals recalculating a fee. "I was the 3rd buyer," she said quietly, only to me. "Not the 1st. I have spent 10 years standing between you and the first one, and the only way to do it was to keep buying you back." The rain kept going. Somewhere behind us in the house a door closed. "That is why the door is open," I said. "Yes. You are not keeping me in. You are keeping them out." "Yes. And if I walk down those steps right now, then you are a free man with no name, no coin, no roof, and an older paper with a signature on it walking around the empire looking for you." She said it evenly, without any weight on it at all, which is the only reason I believed her. "I will not stop you. I will send 2 of my people after you at a distance and they will not interfere unless you are being carried. That is what I can do without owning you. It is not much. I have thought about it for 10 years and it is genuinely not much." I stood there and I did the sum. That is the whole of my talent, and I used it right there on the top step with rain going down my back. What is in front of me? What is behind me? What each door costs? And I turned around, and I walked back into the house, and I closed the door myself. Then I turned the key. From the inside. Let me be very clear about what that was, because I have heard people tell this part wrong. That was not surrender. That was the first purchase I ever made in my life. She was standing in the hall watching me do it with an expression I had not seen on her yet, and would only see a few more times in the years after. She looked like someone who has been braced against a wind for so long that the wind stopping nearly knocks her over. "Right," I said. "Then we are going to talk terms." "Terms," she repeated. "You want a husband. I want to not be a purchase. Those two things are not compatible today, so we are going to build a bridge, and the bridge is a deal, and I am going to be extremely annoying about the deal." Something in her face came back to life so fast it was almost frightening. She folded her arms. "Speak." 90 days, I said. I stay in this house for 90 days. Not as property, not as a fiancé, not as a guest you dress up. As a man under contract, and at the end of 90 days I walk out that door or I do not, and either way nobody buys anything. 90 days is nothing. 90 days is most of what I have. Second. I get a room with a lock and I hold the only key. Not a spare in your desk. The only one. Done. Third. I get your account books. That stopped her. That actually stopped her. My what? Your books. Estate income, standing debts, the household ledger, and every payment made in my name for the last 10 years. I held her eyes, and holding her eyes was like holding a hot pan. You spent 10 years buying my life without telling me the prices. I want the prices. All of them. If I am going to be in this house, I am going to know exactly what I cost. The silence went on long enough that I heard the rain change direction outside. You are asking a Blutrose for her books, she said. I am asking my creditor for an invoice. And she laughed again, but it was different this time, shorter and rougher, and she pushed her hair back off her face with the flat of her hand. Take them, she said. Take all of them. Margit will bring them up. There is one condition, and it is not negotiable. Name it. Eat with me. Every evening. In the same room, at the same table, and if you are angry with me, you will be angry with me to my face and not through a door. I opened my mouth to say that was fine, that was a nothing condition, that was practically free. Then I saw her hand. It was flat against her thigh and the fingers were pressed down hard, holding still on purpose, the way you hold your hand still when it wants to shake. The most feared woman in the empire had just asked me to eat dinner with her, and she was terrified I would say no. Fine, I said, too quickly. Fine, she said, exactly as quickly. We stood there in the hall like two people who had just accidentally agreed to something enormous and could not work out which one of us had been robbed. Handkerchief, I said. Under the glass. With a lamp burning under it. What about it? It is a piece of cloth I wiped my hands on. It is not a relic. Let me be exact about that morning, because people have since tried to make a hero out of it and it makes my skin crawl. I did not fight anyone. I did not carry her anywhere. I stopped and asked if she was hurt. She did not answer, so I gave her the only clean thing I had, which was not clean, and then my father shouted for me and I went. 11 seconds and a dirty handkerchief. That is the whole heroic deed. I know what it is, she said. Then why the glass? She was quiet for a moment. Then she said it in a completely ordinary voice, without any weight on it at all. Because for 10 years it was the only thing I owned that nobody had given me as payment for something. I did not have an answer to that. I still do not, honestly, and I have had years. Thank you, I said. For the door. And the 15 years, or however long you have been. Standing there. She went absolutely still. Then she turned her face away. Do not do that, she said. Do what? Thank me. Her voice had gone flat again, all the way flat, back behind the wall. I did not do it for gratitude and I will not know what to do with it. Ask me for something instead. I am very good at being asked for things, which is, I now understand, the single saddest sentence anyone has ever said to me, and at the time I completely failed to notice, because I was busy feeling clever. That was when the housekeeper came into the hall. Gray hair, ledger face, hands folded. She stopped at the correct distance and inclined her head the correct amount, and she said what she had come to say without looking at me at all. Your Grace. A writer from the capital. The Chamber of Succession has fixed a date for the hearing into the deaths in your family. When? Midwinter. A very small pause. And the chamber has attached the clause. If your Grace is unbetrothed on the day of the hearing, the seat and the estates pass to the collateral branch. Your cousins have already been notified. They are traveling. The hall got very quiet. I looked at Eliza von Blutrose, and she was not looking at me, and her jaw had gone tight, and that was when I understood two things at once. 1. She had a knife at her throat and she had not mentioned it, not once, not even to win the argument, and she had let me stand there and negotiate 90 days against a deadline she could not survive. 2. The old woman with the ledger face had said it out loud in front of me on purpose. I looked at the housekeeper. The housekeeper looked at me for the first time, calmly, with the flat professional patience of a person who has been running a great house for a very long time. She was not warning her mistress. She was telling me the price of the room I had just locked myself into, and hoping it would send me out the window. Thank you, Margit, said the Duchess. That will be all. Margit inclined her head again and left. And I stood in that hall holding, for the first time in my life, something genuinely valuable. Not money. Leverage. 90 days of my time were suddenly worth an entire duchy, and the only person in the empire who could not tell me that was the woman standing 3 feet away with her hand pressed flat against her thigh. I would love to tell you that I did the decent thing. What I actually did was go up to my new room, lock the door with my own key, sit down on the end of a bed with better sheets than I had ever touched, and start working out how much I could charge. Here is what nobody tells you about being kept by a monster. The food is incredible. On my first full morning in the house, a girl of about 16 knocked on my door, waited for me to open it, and then held out a tray with both hands like it might explode. There was bread on it that was still too hot to hold. There were 3 eggs done 3 different ways, because nobody had asked me how I liked eggs and the kitchen had decided to cover the possibilities. There was a small dish of butter with a rose pressed into the top of it. Somebody had spent time on that rose. Somebody's morning had gone into that rose. I ate all of it sitting on the floor with my back against the locked door, holding my own key in my fist, because I had decided overnight that the safest place in the room was the place where nothing could open behind me. Around the 3rd egg I started thinking about how you fatten a pig. You do not beat a pig. You do not frighten a pig. You feed a pig extremely well for a short and specific period of time, and the pig thinks it has fallen in with generous people. I am aware of how this sounds. I have been told. I stand by the reasoning, if not the conclusion. That evening I went down to dinner, because a deal is a deal. The dining room could have held 60 people. There were 2 chairs in it, at one end, close enough that our elbows were in the same country. She was already sitting. She had changed out of the leather into something dark and plain, and without the whip and the boots she looked less like a roomer and more like a woman who had not slept properly in some time. You read the ledgers, she said. Not a question. Some of them. Which ones? The household book and the last 4 years of estate income. I sat. You have a rounding error in your grain accounts. Somebody is skimming about 7 crowns a quarter off the winter feed, and they are doing it carefully enough that they have been doing it for years. She put down her spoon. Say that again. It is in the deliveries, I said. Every load is short by a hair. Never enough to notice in one entry. Across a decade it is a small house. She was quiet for the length of a breath, and then she called for Margaret, and Margaret came in, and Eliza said, winter feed. Someone is short weighing the loads. Find him. Margaret's eyes came to me. It was the first time that woman had looked directly at me since I arrived. Nobody has ever assessed me that thoroughly, including the men who bought me. Yes, Your Grace, she said, and left. Eliza picked her spoon back up like nothing had happened. Nobody has ever found that, she said. I have 3 men whose entire profession is finding that. The 3 men are paid a salary. The man who cheats you is paid by results. It is not a fair fight. How did you find it in an afternoon? Because I have spent my whole life on the other side of that table, I said. Everybody at a card table is losing something and nobody shows you the whole hand. You just have to work out which part of the story costs the teller nothing to tell. She was quiet after that. She ate about 4 bites of what was in front of her, which I would learn was a normal meal for her, and then she said, without any lead in at all, are you going to run? I did not answer immediately, because I have found that the pause is the only part of a lie people actually believe. Would you stop me? No. Then why ask? So that I know whether to have the horses ready or not, said the Duchess of Blutrose, and went back to her soup. Bear in mind that this was a genuinely nice woman having a genuinely nice conversation with me, and I spent the entire walk back to my room deciding she had just been measuring my throat. The nights were where it went wrong. Around the 4th night I woke up because something was touching my wrist. There was a candle by the bed. There was Eliza sitting on the edge of it in a nightdress. There was a length of silk ribbon, pale blue, going around my wrist in a neat and practiced loop, and a second one already tied to the bedpost. I did the only reasonable thing. I made the sound again. The one from the dungeon. Do not thrash, she said, catching my other arm without any apparent effort. You will pull the knot tight and then it will actually hurt. You are tying me to a bed. You roll, she said. I what? You roll in your sleep. You went off the edge twice on your first night and once on your second. The floor in here is stone. She finished the second knot, tested it with a finger, and then, I swear on my life, adjusted the blanket over my shoulder. You have cracked that rib once already. It will not take a fall onto stone. And the solution is rope. It is silk. It will tear before your wrist does. I tested it on my own arm. She said that the way you would say you had checked a horse's shoe. I lay there in the dark for a long time after she left, tied to a very comfortable bed with 2 ribbons that I could have chewed through in a minute, and thought about vivisection. Because here is the thing. My room had a lock. I had the only key. She had knocked, and I had let her in, because it was the middle of the night and she had said one word through the door and the word was my name. She had not broken anything. She had simply walked in through a door I opened, and made me safer, and left. I have since worked out that this is the most frightening thing a person can do to you, and that the fright has nothing to do with rope. Let me tell you about the accounts, because the accounts are where I stopped sleeping. I read them properly over the next week, at night, with a lamp, sitting on the floor because the desk was too comfortable and I did not trust comfortable furniture. I was looking for what I cost. 900 crowns was the number on the paper, and I already knew the number on the paper was a lie by omission, so I went hunting for the rest of it. I found it. It took 4 nights and it was worse than I expected in a direction I had not expected at all. Here is a partial list of things Eliza von Blutrose had purchased over 10 years, all of them in my hometown, none of them in my name. The bakery on Fell Street. That is where I bought bread every week of my adult life. I got the day-old loaf at half price because the baker, Hensel, liked me. Hensel had liked me since the year the bakery nearly went under and an anonymous buyer took on the lease. The rooming house where I lived for 3 years. Purchased. The rent had never gone up. I had assumed the landlord was old and forgetful. Physician who set my rib. Retained. On an annual fee. The fee was larger than his entire practice earned in a year, and the terms specified that he was to treat one named patient without charge and never mention the arrangement. 2 gambling houses. Both of them the sort my father drank in. Both bought and both, within a month of purchase, quietly forbidden to extend him credit past 10 crowns. That last one stopped me for a while. Because I remembered the year my father stopped being able to lose the roof over our heads, and I remembered thinking he had finally learned something. He had not learned anything. Somebody had put a fence around him, and I had lived inside that fence for a decade thinking it was the shape of the world. On the 4th night I reached the back of the oldest book and found a line of payments to a courier. Twice a year. Every year. For 10 years. Small sums, and beside each one a note in a young hand. I had read 1.5 of them when the door opened behind me. She did not ask what I was doing. She looked at the page in my hands and something went out of her face that I had not seen leave it before. Give me the book. No. Leon. You gave me the books. I gave you the accounts, she said. That is not an account. I put my finger on the entry I had not finished and read it out loud instead. Autumn. He is taller. The cough is gone. She did not move. Whose hand is this? Mine. You wrote a note to yourself twice a year for 10 years. The courier reported. I wrote down what he said. He did not say the cough. A man paid to watch a street does not notice a cough is gone. He was quiet long enough that I could hear the lamp. Then she started talking, and she did not look at the book once, because she did not need to look at it. Spring. He argued with a man twice his size about a cartwheel and won, and did not take money for it. Flat. Laundry list. Autumn. He looks tired. Send the physician on some excuse. Spring. And she stopped. I have thought about that stop for 4 years and I am not finished with it. Spring what? You are holding it. Read it yourself. I am asking you. He laughed at something in the street today. Her voice did not change at all, which is how I knew. I have not heard him do that in 2 years. You have never heard me do it, I said. You were not there. No. Then how? I paid a man to stand where I could not stand and tell me the truth twice a year. So that was the whole thing. She had bought a report on whether I was happy, twice a year, for 10 years, written down what came back in her own hand, and never once let me see her doing it. It was not a fence around my father. It was a fence around me. It had been there since I was 11, and every single stone of it had been paid for. I had spent 21 years being proud of exactly one thing. Not my face, not my luck, not my family. I was proud that I had never taken a coin I did not earn. That was the whole inventory of Leon Vance, 1 line long. It was not true and it had never been true, and every loaf I ever felt clever about buying cheap had been bought for me by a girl in a bloody dress who had never once asked me for anything. She was still in the doorway when I finally looked up at her. You are angry. I am something. Tell me which one, and I will have it fixed by morning. That, I said. That right there is the thing. So I decided to run. Not out of fear. Put that on the record, because everyone in that house later decided it was fear and I let them. And that was the beginning of all my trouble. I decided to run because I could not stand in that house 1 more week as the most expensive thing in it. I wanted to walk out, earn something with my own hands, and come back through the front door with a price on me that I had set myself. It is not a plan. That is pride wearing a plan's coat. But it was mine, and it was the first thing in 10 years that was. The kitchens had a drain. I found it because I spent 4 days making myself useful in the kitchens, which was easy, because a house that size runs on people who never look up, and I had grown up invisible. I fixed the pulley on the meat lift. I showed the second cook a way of stacking crates that gave her back an hour a day. I learned every face and every rota, and I found the old flood drain under the cold room, which was there because the castle had been built on the bones of a much older place, and which went out under the wall and joined the town sewers about 400 paces east. I took nothing. That was important to me. No coin, no silver, not so much as a knife from that kitchen. I went down through the drain in the middle of the night before quarter day, wearing my own trousers, my own boots, and a shirt I had earned by fixing the pulley. Sewers of that town are a subject I do not enjoy discussing. I will summarize. It is not water. Everybody says water. It is not. There is a specific moment, somewhere around the 200th pace, when you go under and come back up and your entire relationship with your own body changes forever. I came out through a grating into a low brick space that smelled almost clean by comparison, hauled myself onto a stone lip, and lay on my back in the dark, breathing, filthy, free, and extremely pleased with myself. Above me, through the floorboards, somebody said, "The Bloodrose leaves the house twice a week. The chamber hearing is at midwinter. She must be dead before it, or the cousins get nothing and we get nothing." Now, I have had bad luck in my life. I have had my share. Let me state clearly that of all the places a sewer could have let me out, it let me out under the floor of the old salt warehouse on the East Dock, in the middle of a meeting of the Grey Ledger. Grey Ledger is what the Empire calls its Assassin's Guild, in the same way that the Empire calls a tax a contribution. They are not a legend. They keep books. That is where the name comes from. I lay very still. "Her ward stones are keyed to blood and to intent," said somebody else. "You cannot walk in wanting to kill her. That is the whole trick of the house." "Then we do not walk in wanting anything," said a third voice, patiently. "We walk in delivering feed. 12 men in a grain cart, and the intent goes on when the cart is inside." There was a murmur of professional appreciation. As a man who has since employed a great many people, I will say that it was a genuinely good plan and I would have hired that man. "The collateral branch pays half now and half at midwinter," said the first voice. "And there is a second name attached. A commoner. Vance. Young, dark, nobody. He is in the house." "Why him?" "Because the cousins do not want a widower with a claim. They want the seat clean. And that is the moment. That is the moment, and it deserves an exact account. Because up until that sentence I was going to lie there until they left, and then I was going to go east, find work at a river port, and never think about that woman again except in the specific way you think about a house you once nearly bought. Then I heard 12 men in a grain cart, and I thought about the kitchen where I had fixed a pulley, and the girl of 16 with the tray, and the rose pressed into the butter. 40 people in that house. 40 people who had all, I now knew, come from somewhere worse. And a woman at the end of a table with 2 chairs who would let 12 men walk in with a cart because they were not intending anything yet. I did not decide to be brave. I want that clear too. Nobody in that cellar was brave. What I decided was that I needed to get out of that building and get a message to the house, and the fastest way out was the way I came in, and the way I came in was through a grating that I had already crawled out of. And the floor above me had a knothole in it, and the knothole was directly under a barrel of ground white pepper that had been sitting in that warehouse since the salt trade died. Precision matters here. I did not knock the pepper over. Nobody knocked the pepper over. The pepper had been quietly leaking through that knothole for approximately 9 years, and I put my hand down in it. And then I sneezed. It was not a small sneeze. In a brick cellar under a wooden floor, in the middle of a meeting of 13 professional killers, it was closer to an announcement. Everything above me stopped. "There is something in the drain," said the patient voice. I ran. I got about 6 paces. Then something in my clothing got hot. Not warm. Hot, sharp, and sudden, in a location on my person that I will not specify beyond saying that it was inside my undergarments and that I would like the world to know I did not consent to it being there. I tore at my own trousers in the dark like a man on fire, and something small and bright fell out and hit the stone and lay there glowing like a coal, throwing my shadow 40 feet up the tunnel. A tracking stone. A good one. Blutrose work, sewn into the seam of my underclothes by somebody with very small stitches and a very clear conscience. She had been able to find me from the moment I went into the drain. She had been able to find me for weeks. I would like to record the 2 thoughts I had, in order. The first was, she sewed a beacon into my underwear. The second was, she is going to arrive here in about 90 seconds, and there are 13 of them, and one of her. The floor above me came off. That is the only way I can describe it. It did not open. There was a sound like the world's largest sheet of paper being torn very slowly, and then the salt warehouse simply stopped having a ground floor, and cold air and rain came down into the cellar with a great deal of splintered timber. I saw her for about 2 seconds, standing in the gap with her hair loose and rain going sideways past her, and I have never before or since been so frightened of somebody who was on my side. She did not say anything. That was the worst part. She just came down into that cellar like a dropped stone, and the noise started, and I put my arms over my head and got into the driest corner I could find and was of absolutely no use to anybody. It lasted less than a minute. Afterwards, in the rain, in a warehouse with no roof, she found me sitting on a broken barrel with a length of somebody's belt wrapped around my forearm where a knife had opened it. She crouched down in front of me. She was breathing hard. There was a cut over her eyebrow, and her hands, when she took my arm, were not steady. "You came out," she said. I fell out. "You came out through a drain into a room with 13 of the grey ledger in it." She was unwinding the belt, looking at the cut, not at me. "You had the tracking stone. You put it on the floor. You lit the room up so I could find it. That is not. You brought me the contract," she said, and looked up, and her face was doing something I had never seen it do. "Leon. They were going to come into my house in a grain cart and I would have let them in. You went into a sewer and you brought me the contract." Behind her, 4 of her people were pulling timber off 2 shapes that were not going to get up. Not her people. Theirs. 2 of the grey ledger who had been standing in the wrong part of the room when the roof stopped existing. I looked at those 2 shapes for a long time. I had heard both of them speak. One of them had made a joke about the rain about 4 minutes before he died. It was not a good joke. I remember it exactly. 2 of them are dead, I said. 11 are not, she said. They will talk. This is a very good night. I did not do this on purpose. I know exactly how much you did on purpose, said Eliza von Blutrose. And she looked at me, and I looked at her, and the rain came down between us, and I understood with total clarity that she did not know. That she had built the whole thing in her head on the way over. She was standing in the wreckage of a warehouse looking at a man who had run away from her house and had decided, entirely on her own, that he had run towards something. She was looking at me like I was the 11-year-old on the steps again. And I had one single clean chance to say the true sentence, which was, I was leaving you, and I got lucky, and 2 men are dead because a beacon you hid in my clothes went off in a cellar. Here is what I said instead. You should get that cut looked at. That was it. That was the whole thing. 9 words and a change of subject. I have done worse things since. I have done things that cost more and hurt more people. But that is the one I go back to, because everything after it grew out of it, the way everything in a bad harvest grows out of 1 week of the wrong weather. She helped me up. She put her coat over my shoulders, which smelled of smoke and did not fit at all. And on the way back to the carriage, walking through what had been a warehouse and was now mostly firewood, she said, quite quietly, I am sorry about the stone. The stone. In your clothes. You did not know it was there and I let you not know. She stopped walking. That was not care. I want to say it out loud so that it is said. I was afraid, and I did a thing to you in secret, and it happened to work, and it working does not make it right. You are apologizing, I said. For the tracking device. That saved my life. Yes. She did not look away, which I had not expected. Would you do it again? Yes, said the blood rose. I would do it again tonight, and I would apologize again in the morning, and I would keep doing both until you told me to stop in a way I believed. That is the honest answer. I am aware it is not a good one. At the time we got back to the house, the story had already arrived ahead of us, and the story was better than the truth. By the following evening it was in the market. Within a week it was in the capital. The Blood Rose's commoner had gone alone into the sewers, tracked the grey ledger to the salt warehouse, and lit a beacon to bring his mistress down on them. There were songs. Genuinely. Bad ones. The grey ledger dissolved its eastern chapter and posted a standing note that no contract touching the house of Blutrose would be accepted at any price, and a note like that is worth more than an army because it is written by people who count. And every single person in the empire who heard the story understood one thing about me that was completely false. That I had chosen her. I sat at the end of a table with 2 chairs, 4 nights later, eating extremely good food, being looked at by a woman who thought I had walked into a room full of killers for her sake. And I found that I was not going to correct it. That was the first thing I ever earned in that house, and it was counterfeit, and I do not think I have ever wanted anything the way I wanted to keep it. 6 days after the warehouse, I went to her study to blackmail her. I had it all written out in my head. I had rehearsed it on the stairs. I am going to lay out the rehearsal for you, because the rehearsal is the last piece of evidence that I was ever a decent man. It went like this. Your Grace. The chamber sits at midwinter. If you are unmarried on that day, you lose the seat, the estates, this house, and the 40 people in it. I am the only unmarried man in the empire you can put in front of the chamber, and my 90 days end 11 days before it sits. So let us discuss what my signature is worth. Beautiful. Clean. Ruthless. I was so proud of it I nearly ran up the last flight. She was at her desk with 2 lamps burning and her hair pinned up badly, going through correspondence with the particular violence of a person who hates correspondence. She looked up and said, "Good. Sit down, I want to give you something." I would rather stand. Then stand. She pushed a folded document across the desk with one finger. The estate at Carrow. 2 villages, a mill, a wood, and about 600 crowns a year once the mill is repaired. The patent is drawn. You would be Baron Vance of Carrow by the end of the month. I looked at the paper. I did not touch it. Somebody had drawn up a patent for 2 villages and a mill while I was asleep down the corridor. Why? Because at midwinter I have to stand in front of the chamber of succession and produce a betrothal, and if the man is a commoner they will spend 2 days on his blood and no days on my cousin's. She was already reaching for the next letter. This solves it. It is administrative. Do not read anything into it. You are buying me a title. I am buying myself a shorter hearing. Eliza. She stopped. It was the first time I had used her name without the rest of it attached, and I had not planned to, and both of us noticed. You are buying me a title, I said again, 11 days before a deadline you have never once mentioned to me. You are handing me 2 villages and a mill before I have opened my mouth. Do you know what I came up here to do? Yes, she said. Say it. You came to tell me that your 90 days end before the hearing and that you have worked out what that is worth. She put the letter down. Her voice did not change at all. You are very good at sums, Leon. It was the first thing I ever liked about you and it is not a secret. And why hand me the sword? Because you were going to get it anyway, and I would rather give it to you than have you take it. She met my eyes, and there was nothing defensive in her at all, which was somehow worse. Ask me for more. Go on. Whatever number you were going to name, name it. I will not argue and I will not remember it against you. And there it was. I had walked up those stairs with a knife and she had taken it out of my hand and set it on the table between us and told me to help myself. You cannot rob a woman who empties her own pockets. You can only stand there holding your knife feeling like exactly what you are. No, I said. No what? No to Carrow. No to the barony. No to any of it. Do not be sentimental, it is a hearing, I do not want it. My voice came out louder than I intended and I let it. You want to know what you have never understood about me in 10 years. Every single thing you have ever given me made me smaller. The bread. The physician. The roof. The 900 crowns. Every time you pay, the amount of Leon Vance in the world goes down. She sat very still. I have one thing, I said. One. I am good with numbers and people, and that is mine, and nobody bought it for me. If I walk into the chamber as Baron Vance of Carrow, then in one afternoon you will have purchased the last part of me that was not for sale. The lamps hissed. Somewhere below, in the yard, a horse was being difficult. Then what do you want, she said. Because I have to walk in there with something, and I have nothing else to offer that is not money. Offer me the truth in public, I said. That is it. That is the whole ask. You go into the chamber and you say what you paid for me and to whom and why, out loud, in front of everyone, with the number. And I will stand next to you as what I actually am. Will destroy you. They will price me, I said. There is a difference, and the difference is that a price can be argued with. She considered me the way she considered a column of figures. Then she said, you are the single most expensive thing I have ever failed to buy, and something happened at the corner of her mouth that I would not have called a smile on anybody else. 2 weeks later they announced the betrothal, and my life became a fitting room. There is a specific humiliation to being dressed by professionals. You stand on a box in your undershirt while 4 people who have never spoken to you discuss your shoulders in the third person. He is narrow through here, said the head tailor, sadly. He is not narrow, said Eliza, from a chair by the window where she was not supposed to be. He is unfed. There is a difference, and I would appreciate it if the difference were tailored for your grace, the shoulder line. Take it out here. She stood up and came over and put 2 fingers flat against my back, low, between the shoulder blades, and moved them out along the line she wanted. Here. He carries himself forward because he spent his life apologizing for the space he takes up. The coat should disagree with him. Let the record show that 4 professional tailors, 1 apprentice, and the entire second floor of that house were present while the Duchess of Blutrose ran her hand down my spine in a discussion of coat construction. The apprentice dropped a box of pins. I have never blamed her. You are enjoying this, I said, through my teeth. Immensely. Her hand did not move. Turn. I can turn on my own. You can, she agreed, and turned me anyway, with one hand on my hip, and looked me over from about a foot away for slightly longer than the coat required. Better. Hensel would not recognize you. Do not, I said. Do not what? Do not use his name like you know him. Her hand came off me. I have never met him, she said, after a moment. I bought his lease from a debt broker and I have never once spoken to him. I know that he gave you the day-old loaf at half price, and I know he did that before I owned anything, because I checked. He is kind on his own account. I did not buy that part. He went back to the window and sat down. That is the difference you keep asking me about, she said, quieter. I know there is one. I am not always sure where the line is. That is not a defense, it is a description. The betrothal was held in the Rose Hall of the Imperial Palace, which is what happens when a woman with a duchy decides that a thing will be done properly. 400 people. 6 kinds of wine. A ceiling with a battle painted on it that everyone stares at because it is easier than making conversation. I stood at the top of the hall in a coat that disagreed with me, and I did all right for about 40 minutes. I did all right until a herald announced, in the voice they use for people whose names are on a list, Corvin of Vance, in the county of Ord. He had a new coat. That was the first thing I saw. Green velvet, badly cut, expensive. He came up the length of that hall with his chin high and his arms slightly out from his sides, the way a man walks when he has been imagining a walk. Your Grace, he said, and bowed to Eliza with a flourish that belonged in a different century. Or may I say daughter? The hall did that thing rooms do. It did not go quiet. It went attentive, which is much worse. You may not, said Eliza. Ah, well. He turned to the room with a smile, arms open, playing to the back. You will forgive an old man. It is not every day a fellow's son marries the Empire. Father, I said. Go home. Now. And he reached inside the green velvet and took out a strip of paper, and he held it up at chest height where the light would catch it, and I felt my stomach drop through the floor of the palace. As it happens, my lords, there is a small legal matter. I have taken advice. I have taken very good advice. That was the sentence that told me somebody had paid for the coat. That paper is void, I said. The Blutrose transfer supersedes it. It has been superseded for 6 weeks. This is not the Blutrose paper, boy. He turned it around and showed it to the room, and the seal on the bottom was old and dark and not one I knew. This is 15 years old, boy. This is the first one. He did not explain the rest. He did not have to. Every person in that hall who had ever bought anything arrived at it in the same second, and I watched 400 faces get there. You are arguing that you sold your own son into bondage 15 years ago, said a voice from the side of the hall, and you are arguing it here, in front of 400 witnesses, on purpose. The speaker came out of the crowd without hurrying. Younger than me, fair, straight-backed, in a uniform coat with campaign flashes on it that he had actually earned, which I did not know at the time and which would have annoyed me if I had. Prince Aldrich. Second son. The one they do not write about. Your Highness, said my father, delighted. Do not, said Aldrich, without looking at him. He came up the steps and stopped in front of Eliza, and bowed exactly as far as protocol required and not 1 degree further. Your Grace. I am going to do you the courtesy of doing this in the open. How thoughtful. The chamber sits at midwinter on the deaths in your family. If your betrothal is void on that day, the seat passes. He said it flatly, like a man reading a map. I have supported this man's petition. My mother's faction has paid for his advocate. I want you to hear that from me and not from a clerk. I have to give him this. He could have done it entirely through lawyers and never shown his face, and he stood in a lit hall and told her to her face and let the room hear it. Why, said Eliza. Because my mother's mines are under water and her faction is 4 months from the wall, said the prince. because a marriage to Blutrose would refloat both. And because I do not believe a woman of your name should be spending herself on a mill town clerk with good posture. That is 3 reasons, and only the first one is true, said Eliza. Yes, said Aldrich. The other 2 are for the room. And he turned to me, and he looked at me the way a man looks at a horse he has been told is expensive, and he said, not unkindly, nothing personal, Vance. If you had been born 8 streets over, I expect we would have got on. The chamber of succession sits in a round room with no windows, which I am told is deliberate, so that nobody in it can tell how long they have been in there. It took 2 days. The first day was my father's advocate, who was very good, and who established with enormous care that a bill of transfer of the elder date holds priority under 4 separate precedents, and that the person named in such a bill has no standing to speak in the matter, because the person named in such a bill is the matter. He said that last part looking at me. I was sitting in the petitioner's chair because Eliza had put me there and dared anyone to object. They spent an hour arguing about whether I could speak. They decided I could not. The second day was ours. Eliza's advocate opened. He was a small grey man who cost more per hour than my father had sold me for, and he opened with the manumission, and my father's advocate had a counter ready, because of course he did. The counter was this. A grant of free status made by a purchaser is a private act between owner and owned. It does not extinguish the claim of a prior owner. It only extinguishes the claim of the grantor. In plain words, Eliza had freed me from Eliza. She had not freed me from the men who bought me when I was 6. The chamber liked it. You could feel them liking it, the way you can feel weather change. Eliza stood up. Her advocate tried to put a hand on her sleeve. I saw her look at his hand until he took it back. I would like to give evidence, she said. Your Grace is not required. I am aware of what I am required to do. She walked out into the middle of that round room with no windows, in front of the whole chamber, and she stood there in the plainest dress she owned. I bought him. I want that in the record before anyone else says it in a way I would have to correct. Nobody moved. On the 14th day of the harvest month I purchased from Corvin of Vance a bill of transfer covering his son. I paid 900 crowns. Somebody at the back of the chamber laughed. One short, surprised bark of a laugh, immediately swallowed. 900 crowns. In that room, in front of those people, it was the price of a decent riding horse, and a poor one at that. Paid it, Eliza went on, without any change in her voice at all, because a man who had already sold that boy twice was in the process of selling him a 3rd time, and the 3rd buyer does not use paper. I paid 900 crowns because that was what Corvin of Vance asked, and I did not haggle, because I have never in my life been able to move quickly and haggle at the same time. Your Grace, said the presiding officer, is aware that this evidence supports the petition. It does not, said Eliza. Because I will now say the second part, and my lords will find it in the registry themselves within the hour. She turned and looked at the clerk's bench. On the same day I purchased the first bill, 10 years ago, when he was 11 years old, I lodged a manumission in the Imperial Registry. Not a private grant. Registry Act, witnessed by 3 magistrates, sealed by the Crown. I did not do that as an owner freeing a slave. I did it as a subject petitioning the Empire to record that a person is a person. That is the same instrument, said my father's advocate, standing. It is the grantor's own act. He did not get to finish the sentence, and he never did get to finish it, and I have always thought he knew that going in. It is the Crown's act, said the grey advocate, who had been waiting his entire career for this and was not going to be robbed of it. A registry manumission is not a private release. It is a finding of status. Once the Crown records that a man is free, no prior bill survives, because there is no longer a thing to be claimed. My lords, the paper of 15 years ago does not have priority over the registry. It has been void for a decade. It became void 2 hours after it was outbid. Everything after that was noise. They found for us. It took the rest of the afternoon and about 200 words of Latin, and my father's advocate was paid regardless, and Prince Aldrich sat through the whole thing with a completely straight face and, at the end, stood and bowed to Eliza and left without a word to anybody. He won. And by the time we came out into the cold square in front of the chamber, the number was already in the street. You have to understand how fast that city moves. There were people selling pies outside who knew before we reached the bottom step. 900 crowns. I heard it from a doorway on the way to the carriage, in a voice not meant to carry and carrying beautifully. That is him. That is the 900-crown boy. It stuck. Of course it stuck. It was short, it was true, and it was funny. For the next 2 years I could not walk through a market in that empire without hearing somebody work out loud, What fraction of a horse I was. The carriage. Eliza did not speak for a long time. She sat with her hands in her lap and looked out at the sleet. Then she said, I did that to you. I asked you to. You asked for the truth. I gave you a number. She still did not look at me. There were 4 ways to say it and I picked the one with the number in it, because a number is the only thing I have ever fully trusted, and now you will carry it for the rest of your life. Eliza. I am not fishing. Do not comfort me for something I did to you, it is obscene. We rode. The sleet turned into proper snow somewhere past the river. I want something, I said. She turned her head so fast I heard her collar move. Ask. A place at the Academy of Magic. The autumn intake. Whatever she had been braced for, it was not that. She actually blinked. You have no talent, she said. None whatsoever. None. Leon, I have had you measured. Twice. You have less usable talent than the average kitchen chair, and I mean that as an observation about the chair. I know. Then why? Because the Academy is the only place in this empire where a nobody can walk in on his own paper and come out with a name that nobody bought, I said. Take 4 commoners a year on examination. Examination, not patronage. It is the only door in the world that opens on what is actually inside a man's head. I let that sit. And because I am not going to spend the rest of my life as the 900-crown boy, I said. I am going to spend it as something else, and I am going to pay for the difference myself, and I need somewhere to start. The carriage went over the bridge. She was quiet the whole length of it. I cannot buy you a place, she said. Understand me. I could. I could buy the entire faculty by supper. If I do it, it is worth nothing to you, and I have finally understood that, so I am telling you that I will not. Thank you. Do not. She caught herself, and made a small frustrated sound, and pushed her hair back with the flat of her hand. Sit the examination. If you pass, I will not put 1 crown near it. I will not speak to a single master. I will not send a letter. You swear? I swear, said Eliza von Blutrose. And she meant it, and she kept it, and every word of it was true. I passed the examination. Allow me 1 smug paragraph and then I will stop. For commoner places, 900 and some applicants, 3 papers over 2 days. The first paper was theory, which I failed comprehensively. The second was practical, which I did not even attempt, and I wrote at the bottom of it that I had no talent and did not intend to waste an examiner's afternoon pretending otherwise. Third paper was logistics. Given a garrison, a siege, a supply road, and a mage corps whose castings cost more per day than the garrison eats in a month, allocate. I finished it in half the time and used the rest to write 200 words on why the question was wrong, because the question assumed the mage corps was a fixed cost and no cost in the world is fixed if you are allowed to talk to the people supplying it. They took me on the third paper alone. The master who ran the logistics faculty told me later that he had voted for me out of spite, because he had been saying that about mage corps for 12 years and nobody had listened. That was the first thing in my life I got entirely on my own, and it lasted about 4 days. Because the Academy already knew who I was. That is him. That is the 900-crown boy. They say she keeps him on a very long leash. They say she keeps him on a very short one and he is allowed out for exercise. In fairness to the Academy of Magic. It is the finest school on the continent, its library is a wonder of the age, and its students are, without exception, the worst people I have ever met. I ate alone for 2 weeks. Then a boy called Perrin put a plate down opposite me in the refectory and asked, very politely, whether it was true that the Duchess had bought me a set of silk sheets and whether I would consider selling one. I told him that I would sell him the sheet for 200 crowns and that I would also throw in a piece of advice. He laughed. Then he saw my face and worked out that I was not joking about the price, and I watched a very rich boy discover for the first time in his life that a poor man will absolutely take his money. He paid. I did not have a silk sheet. I bought one in town for 30 and posted it to him with a note that said the advice was to always inspect goods before purchase. He framed the note. We are still in business together, actually, but that comes much later. So. My first month at that academy. I was trying to fail. Not spectacularly. Did not want a scandal, I wanted a quiet, unarguable, respectable dismissal on academic grounds, with a note in my file that said the candidate lacked aptitude, which was true, and a piece of paper I could carry east. The plan was simple. Attend everything. Try nothing. Be so consistently, gently useless that in 4 months they would ask me to leave and I would go, Having proved to the Empire and to her and to myself that Leon Vance was capable of arriving somewhere on his own merit and departing on his own merit and owing no one anything at either end. I lasted until the 3rd week of practical thomics. There was a girl who sat 2 seats along from me in every lecture I attended. First year, commoner intake by the look of her clothes, hair the color of weak tea, a scarf she never took off indoors. She wrote fast and never asked questions. Her name on the roll was Elsa Roth, and every single time I got something wrong, it stopped being wrong. I would set a containment ring badly and the ring would hold. I would misjudge a heat sink by an order of magnitude and the bench would somehow not melt. In my 4th week I completely failed to speak the trigger phrase for a light cantrip, said the wrong word, said a word that is not a word, and a small perfect sphere of light rose out of my palm and hung there like an obedient dog. Demonstrator congratulated me on my pronunciation. I stood there in a room of 30 people holding a light I had not made and thought, very clearly, one of you is helping me. I did not know it was her. That needs saying, because later on everybody assumed I had known from the first day, and it makes me look far cleverer than I am. I thought it was a master. I thought Eliza had bought one after all, and I spent 2 weeks quietly furious about a promise I had no evidence had been broken. Then Aldrich's cousin called me out in the yard. His name was Roderick and he does not deserve more of your attention than that. 3rd year, war college wing, the kind of young man who has been told he is formidable by people who are paid to tell him things. He did it properly. Public. Middle of the practice yard, 40 witnesses, the whole formula. Leon of Vance. You have insulted the honor of my house by your continued existence in the vicinity of the Duchess of Blutrose. I call you to the circle. I decline, I said. You cannot decline. I can decline. Article 9. A student of the commoner intake may decline a challenge from a student of the noble intake without loss of standing, on the grounds that the challenge is structurally unfair. I said it while walking away. It is in the Yellow Book. Page 40. It is there specifically to stop people like you doing this to people like me. Then I will read the article aloud, said Roderick, and after it I will say what I think of a man who hides behind it, and then I will go and say the same thing in the refectory every evening for 4 years. I stopped walking. I did not turn around out of courage. I turned around because I did the sum, and the sum was that 4 years of that would follow me into every room I ever tried to earn anything in. Circle, I said. Now. Get it over with. I had one plan and it was not a good one. Take the hit early, go down, stay down. A duel in the circle ends at first significant effect. It is not a fight to the death, it is a fight to the point where somebody is obviously going to lose. I intended to be obviously going to lose within about 4 seconds. Stepped in. The ward stones came up. Roderick started something with 3 syllables in it that was going to knock me across the yard, and I did the only aggressive act available to a man with no magic whatsoever. I bent down, picked up a pebble, and threw it at him. It was a good throw. That deserves noting. It hit him just above the eyebrow and he swore and lost his 3rd syllable. And then the sky came apart. I do not have the vocabulary. I have asked people who do. What I saw was the light change color, and then the air above the practice yard filled with long burning lines coming down out of nothing, and the far end of the yard, 40 paces of flagstone and a training wall and a very old and much loved oak tree, ceased to exist. The noise arrived afterwards. That is a thing about very large magic that nobody tells you. The noise is late. When it stopped there was a crater where the wall had been, the oak was gone entirely, and it was raining small hot stones on a school full of children. Roderick was flat on his back about 8 feet outside the circle, entirely unhurt, because whoever had done it had placed 40 paces of ruin exactly 1 pace clear of a living person. I was still standing in the circle with my hand out, in the throwing position, like an idiot. 40 people had watched me pick up a pebble, throw it, and delete a section of the Academy of Magic. There was a very long silence. Then somebody at the back said, "Void sake," in the flat voice of a person whose entire understanding of the world has just been repriced, and after that it was noise for about an hour. Here is what the Academy decided, over the following 2 days, entirely without my participation. That the commoner Leon Vance had been concealing a talent of the 7th circle or higher. The pebble was a focus, and a deliberately humiliating one, chosen to make a point. That his examination results had been a screen. That the Duchess of Blutrose had not bought a pet, she had found something in a mill town and hidden it for 10 years, which explained everything about her behavior, and by the way, was that not exactly the kind of thing she would do. Within a week, the story had a name. They called it the Pebble. By midwinter there were 3 separate boys in the first year who had taken to carrying a small stone, and I once saw a girl try to fight a rat with one. I would like to say I corrected the record. I did not. I had corrected nothing after the warehouse, and it had bought me a reputation. Now I had two, and the second one was built on top of the first, and by then I was standing on a tower of lies about 4 stories high, and the view was very good. I went looking for the culprit that night. The yard was roped off and there was a master's ward across the gap in the wall. I did not go to the yard. I went to the bursary, because I have never solved a problem by looking at the crater when I could look at the invoice. The academy charges for everything. Every casting above the 4th circle done on its grounds is metered, logged, and billed, because the wards that keep the school from being flattened by 19-year-olds are expensive and somebody has to pay for them. Night ledger was in the outer office, and the outer office was not locked, because who steals a ledger? There was one entry for that afternoon. Uncredited casting, 9th circle, category orbital. Duration 4 seconds. Metered cost 9,200 crowns. 9,200. 10 times what I had been sold for. In 4 seconds. To stop a boy called Roderick from bruising my ribs. And underneath, in the settlement column, in a clerk's neat hand, an account number. I knew that account number. I had spent 4 nights on the floor of a locked room reading a decade of that account number. I sat down on the bursar's step in the dark and laughed until I had to stop because it was starting to sound wrong. So she was somewhere on these grounds. What a ledger could not tell me was how. She had sworn she would not buy me a place, and she does not lie, which left exactly one door, and I could not make myself believe she had walked through it. I went to the lecture the next morning and I sat down in my usual seat, and 2 seats along the girl with the weak tea hair had her scarf up and her head down and was writing very fast about nothing. I looked at the way she held her pen. I had watched that hand sign a manumission and crush an iron cuff and stop dead against her own thigh so I would not see it shake. "Elsa," I said. She looked up. "Yes." "Nothing," I said. "You dropped this." And I put a pebble down on the desk in front of her and went back to my notes. I want to describe what happened to the Duchess of Blutrose in that moment, because I have very few victories over that woman and I intend to enjoy them all in public. She went the color of a nice sunset. All the way up to the hairline. She looked at the pebble. She looked at me. She looked at the pebble. And then, because she is who she is, she picked it up, put it in her pocket, and said, in a voice pitched for the row, "Thank you. It is important to me." She found me that evening on the wall behind the refectory, where first-years go to be miserable in private. She did not sit down. She stood in front of me with the scarf still up, which on her looked like a disguise made out of nothing. "You know. I know what a casting costs. I do not know how you are here." I sat the entrance. "You sat the entrance." "In the hall. In a queue. Behind a boy from Fell Street who was sick into a bucket first. You could have bought the school. I promised you I would not buy the place." She said it the way she says everything, as though reading it off a page. "You said nothing about sitting for it." I laughed, and then I stopped, because she had not. "How did you do?" There was a pause. I could have parked a cart in. "9th in the year." "That is very good." "It is not first," said the Duchess of Blutrose. There were 4 questions on resonance I did not finish. I have known resonance since I was 9. Nobody told me they take the paper away from you while you are still writing on it. "Then stop hiding," I said. "Take the scarf off, sit at the front, let them find out who you are. They will learn nothing with me in the room. Neither will you, at the back, coming 9th. That is not why I am here. I know why you are here. You promised not to buy me and this was the only door left open. I am telling you it is a bad door and I would like you to use a better one." "Which one?" "Ask me," I said. "When you want to know whether I am all right, ask me. It is free. It does not take 4 seconds and 9,200 crowns." She thought about that for a long time. Then she said, "I will try one," which from her was a treaty, and she asked whether my ribs hurt, and they did not, and she looked so unhappy at being told the truth that I nearly took it back. She did not take the scarf off. But she stopped sitting 2 seats along, and for the rest of that term I got to watch the most feared woman in the empire be a student, and I would not have traded it for the house. I watched her sit through elementary resonance with her jaw clenched, being told things she had known since she was 9 by a man she could have bought. I watched her carry her own tray. I watched her queue. I watched a 3rd-year shove her in a corridor without knowing what he was shoving, and I watched her do absolutely nothing about it, and her face while she did nothing about it was the most extraordinary thing I have ever seen. Once, in the library, I watched her fall asleep sitting up over a book on wardcraft, and I sat across from her for 40 minutes and did not wake her, because it was the first time I had ever seen her not on duty. That is when it started. Not the dungeon, not the warehouse. A library, a bad chair, and a woman who did not know she was being watched for once. 2 days after the pebble, the church arrived. The ninth choir sent a saintess to certify the event, because a ninth circle casting on school ground is a matter for the crown and an unexplained one is a matter for the church. Her name was Talia. She was about my age, with the kind of stillness people mistake for peace, and she came into the practice yard in white with 2 acolytes and a warrant, and she was the single most tired-looking person I had seen since I left the mill town. She walked the crater. She stood in the circle. She held out her hand over the flagstones and did something that made the hair on my arms stand up. Then she turned around and looked at me and did not stop looking. "Come here," she said. "Your Grace, Reverence. I am not a duchess, I am a clerk who can see. Come here." I came. She put her palm flat on my sternum, and she looked at nothing over my left shoulder for about 10 seconds, and then she said, very quietly, "Oh, is that a good oh? How many lives do you remember?" The yard went away. I want to explain something and then I am going to leave it alone for a while, because it is mine and I do not much like handling it. I was 5 years before the handkerchief, I had a fever. 3 days. My mother was alive then. She told me afterwards that I had talked the whole time and none of it was in any language she knew. When it broke, I had things in my head that had not been there before. Not a life. Not a name. Nothing so tidy. Pieces. I knew that if you cut a potato into thin lengths and cooked it in hot fat and salted it immediately, people would pay money for it and keep paying, forever, in every country, without ever getting tired of it. I knew that if you printed a sheet of paper with pictures on it and a small amount of gossip and sold it for less than it cost to make, you could sell the space next to the gossip for more than the sheet was worth. I knew that ice keeps, if you cut it in winter and bury it in sawdust. I knew 1,000 small dull things like that, and not one useful thing about myself, and I had spent 15 years assuming it was a very long dream, because the alternative was that I was mad and being mad is expensive. 1.5, said Talia. That is what is in you. 1 whole and 1 worn very thin. I have read about it and I have never seen it and I am going to have to write it down. Please do not. I am required to. Reverence. I looked at her. She was very tired and very young and there was a darn in the hem of that white robe. What does your order get, if you write it down? She did not answer for a moment. The ninth choir has 42 houses, she said. 11 of them will not survive the winter. If I certify a genuine wonder, the crown tithe comes back and my master, who is going blind and who has nowhere else to be, dies in a bed instead of on a road. And if you write down a farm boy with a strange head, then it is a curiosity, and curiosities do not carry a tithe. We stood there in a crater together, 2 poor people with expensive problems. Certify the casting, I said. That is what your warrant is for. 9th circle, unattributed, event confirmed. Every word true. Nothing about me. That is not the whole truth. It is all of the truth your warrant asks for, I said. Reverence, I am going to be blunt, because I think you have not eaten today and neither have I. You need money. I am about to have some. Do not spend the only thing you cannot get back on a boy with a pebble. She was silent long enough that I heard water moving somewhere under the flagstones. Then she wrote the short version, and she signed it, and I did not understand until much later that I had just taught a genuinely honest person the first step of how to trade. That is on me too. There's a long list. Wren Marlowe found me 4 days later. She did not knock. She came into the reading corral I had claimed at the back of the 3rd library, sat down on the opposite side of the table, and put a sheet of paper in front of me with the corner squared to the table edge. Small, sharp, badly cut hair, ink to the 2nd knuckle, and a scholarship gown that had been repaired so many times it was mostly repair. 9,200 crowns, she said. 9th circle. Category orbital. Settled on a Blutrose house account within the hour, which means it was pre-authorized, which means somebody stood in that yard already holding a metered casting. I looked at the sheet. It was a copy of the bursary entry in a very neat hand. You broke into the bursary, I said. Work in the bursary. I do the night ledger. I am the reason the handwriting is legible. She folded her hands. You did not delete that wall. You have the thermic potential of a wet towel. I have seen your practical marks, I file them. You could have taken this to a master. Yes. Or to a broadsheet. There are no broadsheets. That is the second thing I want to talk to you about. She leaned forward. First thing, Why did you not correct it? Everyone in this school thinks you are a seventh circle at minimum. You are letting them. I could have lied. She had the invoice. Lying to her would have been like lying to a mirror. Because it is the first thing anybody has ever assumed about me that was better than the truth, I said. Ren nodded slowly, like a woman confirming a measurement. Right, she said. Then here is my offer. I keep the ledger sheet in a place that is not on me. I do not tell anyone. And in exchange I get a third of whatever you are about to do, in writing, before you do it. I am not about to do anything. Leon. She said my name the way she corrected a sum in the night ledger, briskly, without malice, and without any expectation of argument. You sold Perrin Ashby a 30-crown sheet for 200 crowns and included a moral lesson to make him feel he got value. You have been buying the kitchen's waste potatoes for 4 weeks at a price that makes no sense unless you know something about potatoes that the kitchen does not. I put my pen down. What do you want the third for? 940 crowns, she said, without a pause, which told me she had had that number in her head for a long time. That is what it costs to buy out the mining lease on my village from the Ashmere Consortium. My brothers are 12 and 9. They work the pump gallery because the lease says the village owes labor and the village has no coin. I have been trying to earn 940 crowns since I was 15. 940. 40 crowns more than my father sold me for. I did not say that out loud. I have never said it out loud to her. You are an alchemist, I said. I am the best applied alchemist in this school and everybody in the faculty knows it, and I will not get a chair, because chairs are given to people who can afford to wait. She sat back. A third, Leon. In writing. A quarter, I said, and I pay the lease buyout as a first charge out of my share before either of us takes a crown. Ren Marlowe looked at me for a second and a half. Why, she said. Because a third of nothing is nothing and you will be waiting again in a year, I said. Take the quarter in the first charge. She stuck out her hand. Ink to the second knuckle. That is how the largest commercial concern in the empire started. 2 people at a library table, 1 stolen invoice, a bag of waste potatoes, and a girl who wanted 940 crowns. We sold the first fried potatoes out of a hand cart at the west gate of the academy on a wet evening at the end of the month. Thin lengths, hot fat, salt on immediately. That is the entire secret, and it is not a secret. It is just that nobody in that world had ever bothered, because potatoes were peasant food and nobody expensive had ever been hungry at 10 at night. We sold out in 40 minutes. Ren stood there with grease on her sleeves and her hands full of copper, counting, and she looked up at me with an expression I would spend the next 2 years chasing. Do it again tomorrow, she said. Do it every night. Leon. Where did you get this? And I opened my mouth to make a joke, and across the yard, in the rain, I saw a girl with weak tea hair standing at the edge of the lamplight with a paper cone of potatoes in both hands, eating them one at a time, watching me with an expression of such complete and undefended happiness that I forgot the joke entirely. My 90 days ended on a Tuesday. Nobody mentioned it. Not Margaret, who had counted them, and not Eliza, who had counted them twice. I found out because I went to write the date on an order for fat and stopped with the pen down, and did the sum, and realized the contract I had extorted out of a terrified woman in a rainy hall had expired 6 days ago and I had not noticed. I sat there for a while. Then I finished the order for fat, and I did not say anything to anybody about it, and that was the answer, and everybody in that house understood it perfectly without one word being spoken, which is the only elegant thing I have ever done. The business grew the way a fire grows in a dry season. The potatoes paid for the cart. The cart paid for the second cart. By midwinter we had 14 of them and a rented cellar and a woman called Asa who ran the fat supply and would have run the empire if anyone had asked her. Then the sheets. Ren thought I was insane. I sat her down and explained it 3 times and she still thought I was insane, and to be fair, on paper it is insane. You print a single large sheet. On it you put 4 woodcuts, a page of court gossip that is true enough to be safe and false enough to be interesting, the market prices for grain, wool, salt, and iron, and 1 story about somebody being humiliated. You sell that sheet for 1 copper. It costs you 1.5 coppers to make. You lose half a copper every time somebody buys it, said Ren. Yes. Every time. Yes. Then how? Because a brewer will pay 4 crowns to have his name printed in the corner next to the gossip, I said, if 20,000 people are going to look at that corner on the same morning. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said a word I will not repeat, and pulled the paper over, and started doing the arithmetic herself, and by the bottom of the page she was writing faster than I could follow. That is the moment I understood that I had not found a partner. I had found somebody better at this than me who had simply never been shown that the game existed. The first sheet came out at the end of the frost month. We called it the copper because it cost a copper, and because I have never once in my life been clever about names. By spring the copper was in 9 cities. By summer there were 2 competitors and both of them had copied the wrong half of the model and both of them were dead by autumn. And through all of it, my name was on nothing. That was Wren's rule, actually, not mine. She pointed out, in her flat bursary voice, that the moment the Empire learned that its favorite hidden archmage was selling fried potatoes, the price of everything I touched would triple and every noble house on the continent would want a share as a favor. So we invented a man. We called him the Broker, which is the least imaginative name in the history of commerce and worked perfectly for exactly that reason. He wore a gray mask because gray is the least interesting color there is, he never gave a name, and he was, at various points, played by me, by Wren, by Asa, and once, memorably, by Perrin Ashby, who is 6 inches taller than me and had to conduct an entire negotiation sitting down. I was making more money in a month than the Blutrose estates made in a quarter. I had told exactly one person, and she was the one person who could have checked the ledgers and had promised not to. That summer, somebody put a bag over my head. A word about being kidnapped, having now been kidnapped professionally. There is a period, right at the start, before the fear arrives, where you are mostly annoyed. I was carrying 2 crates of woodblocks. I had been going to eat. When they took the bag off I was in a stone room again, which felt like a personal insult from the universe, except that this stone was black and warm, and there was a window, and out of the window I could see the ashfold. Nobody in the Empire has seen the ashfold. It is on the other side of the serrated pass, which is closed, and has been closed for 200 years, and the closing of it is the reason salt costs what it costs. There was a woman sitting on the window ledge with one boot up, eating an apple. Tall. Gray-skinned, in the way that stone is gray, with horns that came back off her temples and swept down like a ram's, and a court coat with the sleeves cut off at the shoulder because she had clearly decided sleeves were a human affectation. You are the archmage, she said. No. She stopped chewing. Say that again. I am not an archmage, I said. I have no talent at all. I failed the practical paper on purpose because I could not have passed it by accident. The thing at the academy was not mine. If you have brought me here on the basis of the pebble, you have made an expensive mistake and I am extremely sorry about it. She weighed that without hurrying. Then she took her boot off the ledge, sat up properly, and said, "Why in the 9 cold hells would you tell me that?" "Because you are going to find out in about a day," I said, "and I would rather be the person who told you than the person who was caught." Princess Nyra of the Ashfold put the apple down. "Sit," she said. "You are not what I paid for, but you are more interesting, and I have had a very boring year. Here is what I learned in that room over the following 9 hours, and I want to lay it out plainly because everything afterwards runs on it. The Ashfold is not a pit of monsters. It is a country. It has a bad king, a worse council, and an heir who is not allowed to speak in it. Father wanted a war. Not for any reason a person could argue with. He wanted one because a king who is at war does not have to explain the harvest. Nyra did not want a war, because she had done the arithmetic, and the arithmetic said that the Ashfold could win the first 3 years and would starve in the 4th. "So I came for the Blood Rose's men," she said. "Because she is the only human my father is actually afraid of, and if I hold something of hers I have a voice at the council for the first time in my life." "And now you are holding a potato merchant." "Now I am holding a potato merchant," she agreed, gloomily. I looked out of the window at the Ashfold for a while. "What do you have," I said, "that the Empire cannot buy at any price?" "Salt," said Nyra. "The serrated pass. 200 years of it." "How much salt?" "Enough to salt the world." "And what does the Ashfold not have?" She thought about it, honestly, which is a thing I have always liked about her. "Grain," she said. "Iron. Paper. And anything at all to do on a winter evening." So I did not negotiate my release. I negotiated a trade treaty. It took the rest of that day and most of the night, and neither of us had any authority to do it, and both of us knew it, and we did it anyway on the floor of a warm black room with a piece of chalk. Salt west through the serrated pass, at a price that undercut the imperial monopoly by a third and still made her council rich enough to stop wanting a war. Grain, iron, and paper east. And, in the last hour, when we were both tired and stupid, the clause that turned out to matter. The copper, in the Ashfold. Printed on their side, in their language, with their gossip. She laughed at me for 20 minutes. Then she signed it, because she is the only person in this story who has ever understood immediately what a bored population is worth. At dawn her chamberlain came in and said, With the flat despair of a man who has stopped expecting good news, Highness. The Bloodrose is at the gate, Naira swore. She stood up. She started giving the sort of orders you give when you have 20 minutes to prepare a fortress. The Chamberlain waited until she stopped. Highness, he said. She is at the gate. Yes, she has been at the gate for 6 hours, said the Chamberlain. She has not approached. She sent word that she will wait until the man inside is finished with his business, and asks that we tell her when he is. The room went completely silent. Naira turned around and looked at me with an expression I have never been able to describe. Something between suspicion and awe and a sort of professional envy. What did you do to her? She said. I went down through that black fortress and out through the gate, and there was a carriage on the road with 2 people beside it, and one of them was standing in the middle of the road with her hands at her sides in the grey light, and she had been standing there since the middle of the night. I stopped about 10 feet away. You waited, I said. You were in a negotiation, said Eliza. If I had come through that wall you would have lost your position. You waited outside a foreign fortress for 6 hours because you did not want to weaken my bargaining position. Yes. Eliza. They kidnapped me. Yes, she said. And then you started talking, and about 2 hours in the guard rotation changed on the north wall and the new watch was slack, which meant nobody in that fortress was expecting an attack, which meant nobody in that fortress thought you were a hostage anymore. Her jaw was tight. So I made myself stand in the road, and it was the hardest thing I have done since I was 14, and if you had been hurt I would have taken the mountain apart and you would have hated me forever and I would have done it anyway. I did not say anything for a moment. Behind me, high up, I was fairly sure a princess of the Ashfold was hanging out of a window. I got the salt, I said. I know, said Eliza. I could hear you. You get loud when you are winning. The party at the manor was Margaret's idea, which should have warned me. 40 people, all the household. The long hall opened for the first time since the old Duke died. There was a barrel of something dreadful from the Ashfold that Naira had sent as a joke and that turned out to be the best thing any of us had ever drunk. And came. She had never been to the house before and she stood inside the door for a good minute looking at the ceiling like it had personally insulted her. Then she came and found me and grabbed my forearm with both hands, and her face was doing something I had never seen it do. I got it, she said. Got what? The Belhest grant. She was actually shaking. Applied thalamic assay, 3-year endowment, 400 crowns a year and a laboratory. Leon. I applied in the spring and I did not tell you because I thought if I told you, you would buy it, I said. Yes. Ren. I did the assay myself, she said. 9 samples, my method, my write-up, and old Belhest is a miserable pedant who has never given a grant to a woman and he gave it to me because my numbers were better than everybody's. Leon, I bought the lease. This morning. 940 crowns to the Ashmere Consortium, my money, my grant, she stopped, because she had run out of air. Say it, I said. My brothers are out of the pump gallery, said Ren Marlowe, and I did it. I have replayed that evening more times than any other evening of my life. There is a version of it where I am simply happy, and I drink the dreadful Ashfold liquor, and I go to bed, and the next morning everything is exactly the same as the night before. That version lasted about 2 hours. Margaret came and found me at the end of the hall, where I had gone to be out of the noise. She had a book under her arm. Big, old, canvas-bound, the kind of book that lives in a strong room. Sit down, Mr. Vance, she said. Margaret had never once called me anything. Not sir, not my lord, not by name. 7 months in that house and she had addressed me exclusively in the passive voice. I sat down. She put the book on the table and opened it about a third of the way in. This is the house purchase book, she said. It is not the estate ledger. Her Grace does not know I keep it in the strong room and she does not know I am showing it to you and I will tell her tomorrow, because I do not lie to her. Why? Because you are going to be the master of this house, said Margaret, and I have decided that this house does better with a master who knows what he is standing on than one who finds out later. She turned the book around. It was a list. Names, dates, sums, and in the last column, a short note. Margaret Holt. 19 years ago. 200 crowns. Purchased from the estate of Lord Vell, where she had been kept as a live target for the practice of the fourth circle. I read that line 3 times. Live target, I said. Lord Vell had 9 of us, said Margaret, in exactly the voice she used to announce that dinner was served. It was not illegal. There is no law that says what a bonded servant may be used for. He was not even unusual. He was simply careless enough to be talked about. And she bought you. She was 5 years old, said Margit. She could not buy anything. Her mother bought me, for 200 crowns, because her mother was a good woman married into that family and it killed her in the end. He turned the page. Her Grace continued it, she said. At 14, when she took the seat. The list went on for 6 pages. 41 names. 19 years. Every one of them bought out of a house that used people the way Vel used them, and every one of them with the same short note in the last column, in the same hand I had read on the floor of a locked room. Free to purchase. Offered position. Accepted. Or, 4 times, in the same neat hand, free to purchase. Offered position. Declined. Passage and 60 crowns provided. 41 people. And an empire that had watched a duchess by pretty commoners for 20 years and had arrived, on its own, at the only explanation it could imagine. They say nothing walks out of her manner. They were right. 41 people had walked in and 37 of them had never wanted to leave. She never corrected it, I said. My voice did not sound right. I invented it, said Margit. I looked up the black bags, she said. The living targets. All of it. I put it into the market myself, in the 2nd year, and I have kept it fed ever since, because a house full of people like us is safer if everyone is afraid of it. She folded her hands. Her Grace knows. She has never asked me to stop. That is her choice and I will not pretend otherwise. I sat there with my hand flat on that page and I could not speak. Every rumor. Every joke. Every time somebody in a market had lowered their voice about the blood rose. 10 years of a woman letting the world call her a butcher because being called a butcher kept 41 frightened people safe. Turn the page, said Margit. What? Turn the page, Mr. Vance. I did not bring you the whole book to show you the good part. That would be a very cheap trick and I am not cheap. I turned the page. It was the current year. Recent entries, in Eliza's own hand, still fresh enough that the ink had a shine. A mill lease in Ord. A shipping bond. 2 commissions to painters. And, 4 lines from the bottom, dated 3 days before the Belhust grant was announced, Ashmere Consortium. Mining lease, village of Marlow, in perpetuity. Purchased. 11,000 crowns. Note, in the margin, in the hand I knew, she will win the grant on merit. He would still worry about the brothers. Remove the worry. Do not tell either of them. I read it 4 times, the way you read a thing hoping the words will rearrange. 11,000 crowns for a lease worth 940, bought 3 days early, so that when Wren Marlowe walked into the Ashmere office that morning with her own hard-won money in her own hands to buy her brothers out of a pump gallery, there had been nothing left to buy. The consortium had taken her 940 crowns for a lease they no longer held. Because if they had told her the truth, she would have asked who bought it. She did not do it to hurt her, I said. No, said Margit. She did it because I was worried about them. She did it for me. Yes, said Margit. That is worse. Yes, said Margit. That is why I brought you the book tonight and not tomorrow. Found Wren in the courtyard. She was sitting on the mounting block with her boots off, absolutely radiant, telling Perrin Ashby about a laboratory. I could have waited until morning. I could have gone to Eliza first. I could have done 6 or 7 things that a wiser man would have done. I sat down next to her and I told her, because she had a right to it, and because I could not think of a single hour of the rest of my life in which I would be willing to know that and let her not know it. She listened without moving. When I finished, she put her boots back on. That is what I remember. She did it very carefully, both laces, all the way up. Say the number again, she said. 11,000 for a lease worth 940. Yes. So she paid 11 times what it was worth, said Wren, to make sure that a thing I had been working towards since I was 15 was already finished before I got there. She was trying to know what she was trying to do. Wren stood up. Her voice was completely level and that was how I knew. Leon, I am going to say this once and then I am going to go, because if I stay in this courtyard I am going to say it in a way I cannot take back. All right. I have exactly one thing, she said. It is not my brothers, because they are people and they were never mine. It is not the laboratory, they can take that back. The one thing I have is that I earn things. She looked up at the lit windows of that enormous house. That was mine this morning, she said. It was mine for about 6 hours. Wren. Do not, she said. You are going to offer me something. I can see you doing it. You are going to offer me a share, or the lease back, or a laboratory of your own, and Leon, I want you to hear how that sounds. I want you to hear that the answer to being bought is not being bought by somebody nicer. I did not say anything because she was right, and it was already halfway up my throat. The quarter stands, she said. The copper stands. I am not throwing away a business because a rich woman is a fool. But I am not coming to this house again, and I am not sitting at your table, and when you finally work out what you are actually angry about, do not come to me for a witness. She walked out through the gate and did not look back, and I sat down on the mounting block where she had been sitting until I could not feel my hands. Then I went upstairs. Eliza was in her study with 2 lamps burning and her hair pinned up badly, going through correspondence, exactly the way she had been on the night I came up there to blackmail her, and I stopped in the doorway and had a moment of vertigo so complete that I had to put a hand on the frame. You bought the Marlowe lease, I said. She put down the letter. She did not ask how I knew. She did not defend it. She did not do any of the 6 things I had been braced for on the stairs. Yes, she said. 11,000 crowns. 3 days early. Yes. She had it, Eliza. She had the money in her hand. She had done it herself. My voice was going and I let it go. And you took the last 3 steps for her because you could not stand to watch somebody I care about be worried for 1 more week. Eliza was quiet. Then she said, would you like me to lie about this? I can. I have thought of 4 ways to make it sound better and every one of them would work on you. No. I did not think about her at all, said Eliza von Blutrose. That is the true version. I did not consider Ren Marlowe for 1 second. I saw a thing that was making you unhappy and I removed it, and the fact that it belonged to somebody else did not enter my head, because things belonging to other people has never in my life been a reason to stop. She stood up. I am not going to say I am sorry, she said, because I said that about the tracking stone, and then I did it again, and an apology you intend to repeat is just a receipt. I looked at her for a long time. I want to be exact about what I was actually feeling, because everybody who has heard this story assumes it was rage, and it was not rage. It was something much simpler and much colder. It was that I finally understood I was going to spend my entire life inside a fence that somebody else was paying for, and that the fence would get further and further out, and that it would always, always be there. I found the purchase book too, I said. The 41. Vel. Margit. Something moved across her face. That is not for me to be praised for, she said. I know. I am not going to praise you. I took the key out of my pocket. The only key, to the only lock, in the only room in the world that was mine. That is why this is happening tonight and not last month. I put it on the desk. You are the best person I know, I said, and I cannot be near you. Leon. You gave me a paper 10 years ago that says I am a free man. I stepped back into the doorway. I have never used it. I have been living in a house I chose, with an income one earned, next to a woman I stopped. I want it recorded that I stopped. Every one of those things is true, I said, and I cannot tell any more whether they are mine, because every single time I turn around, you are 3 days ahead of me having already paid. That became a habit, and I am not proud of it. For about a year afterwards I checked. Every contract, every carter, every landlord who was suddenly reasonable with me, I checked the ownership before I signed anything. I got good at it. There is a particular feeling that arrives when you find her 3 days in front of you again, and it is not gratitude and it is not even anger. It is a man discovering that a room he has just walked into was measured for him. He did not move from behind the desk. Her hand was flat on the wood, pressed down, holding still on purpose. Where will you go, she said. That is the point, I said. I am not going to tell you. I will find you in 11 days. I know you can. I took a breath. So I am going to ask you for something instead. You said you were good at being asked. Her eyes came up. Do not look for me, I said. The lamps hissed. How long, said Eliza. Until I come back. And if you do not come back? Then you will have found out something true, I said, and you will have paid nothing for it. Alice caught me in the kitchen passage on the way out, which is not a thing a still-room girl does to a man leaving a house at midnight, and she had plainly been sitting on the step for an hour waiting to do it. She was 17 by then. She put herself in the middle of the passage. You said you would teach me my letters. I had said that. In the spring. To be pleasant, and then not once again after. Alice, I am leaving. I know you are leaving. The whole house knows. Teach me now, then. Now. You have a bag on your shoulder and no horse, and it is 4 hours to the road. I told her I would do it when I came back, which is the most expensive sentence I have ever said out loud, and I did not know that, and she did. She looked at me the way you look at a rate you have no intention of accepting. No, she said. You will not be back, and I am not spending 2 years waiting on a maybe from a man who does not know his own plans. I will do it myself. Out of what? Out of anything with words on it. Tobin was in the yard with a lantern and would not let me have the grey. He said it was his to say, because he was the one who had to answer for the horses, and I could take the old bay or I could use my legs. He was right, and he knew he was right, and he enjoyed it for about 4 seconds. Then he gave me an apple out of his own coat and told me not to come back thin, and I have not eaten an apple since without thinking about it. I walked out of that house at some hour past midnight with the clothes I had earned, a bag of woodblocks, 1/4 of a business in a girl's handwriting, and no key to anything at all. Behind me, in a lit window on the 2nd floor, the Duchess of Blutrose stood absolutely still for 4 hours. I know that because Margit told me, much later, and because Margit does not lie. I did not go far. I want to admit that at the start, because it undercuts everything I am about to tell you, and it should. I went 110 miles south, to Harrogate, which is a port city with a river, a customs house, and no interest in anybody's family. I took 2 rooms over a ropemaker's and I did not write to anyone. For 11 days I woke up every morning and thought, today. Today she finds me. She did not. On the 12th day I stopped listening for horses and started working, and that is the day the money began, because it turns out that grief and commerce use exactly the same part of a man. Here is what I built in 14 months. I am going to go quickly, because I have discovered that people who made money enjoy describing how they made it far more than anybody enjoys listening. Ice. You cut it out of the northern lakes in the frost month, you pack it in sawdust in a stone cellar, and in high summer you sell it to every fishmonger, surgeon, and confectioner in a river city for 20 times what it cost you. Nobody had done it because nobody had connected the words winter and July. The whole business is 2 words and a hole in the ground. Salt. The serrated pass opened in the spring under the treaty I had chalked on a floor, and the imperial monopoly, which had been comfortable for 200 years, discovered what happens to a comfortable monopoly. I did not own the salt. I owned the road it came down, in the sense that I had bought every warehouse, cart yard, and river frontage between the pass and the sea before anybody understood that the pass was going to open. Copper. 9 cities became 19. Then the Ashfold edition, which sold out its first printing in 4 hours and made Naira, in a letter I still have, call me a name in her own language that she assures me is affectionate. I checked that too, obviously. 19 cities in 1 season is not a thing that happens to a newspaper on its own. I spent 2 days inside my own distribution looking for her, and I found no purchase, no subsidy, and nobody's money in it but mine. It had spread because for 2 years I had paid carters properly and on the day, and carters talked to carters. I started the conversation with her as an accusation and had to finish it as something else, and she let me get all the way to the end without moving. You went looking for me, she said. Yes. And I was not there. No. And the woman who had bought a physician, a street, and 2 gambling houses looked more pleased about a thing she had not done than about anything she ever paid for. The potatoes. Always the potatoes. 14 carts became 400, and the day I realized I was making more from fried potatoes than from salt was the day I stopped being embarrassed about the fried potatoes. By the 2nd autumn I had more money than the Blutrose estate. How it felt is easy to say and hard to hear. It felt like nothing at all, because I could not tell the only person whose opinion I wanted. Now. The love potions. I need to explain this properly, because it is the part of my life I am least proud of and the part everybody thinks is funny. There are no love potions. Not in this world. It is not that they are rare or restricted or expensive. The thing simply does not exist and cannot exist, because affection is not a state that can be induced by anything you can put in a cup. Every alchemist knows it. Ren knew it at 15. The church has known it for 400 years and does not say so loudly, because a church that announces there is no such thing as a love potion will spend the next decade arguing about what else there is no such thing as. But the empire believes in them absolutely, in the wholehearted and slightly desperate way that people believe in anything that would fix everything at once. So when I needed a business that could explain a great deal of money moving in small amounts from a great many rich houses without anybody asking where the money had actually come from, I did not have to invent a market. I only had to open a door in front of one. The formula was rosehip, honey, a very good brandy, and a trace of powdered mica so it caught the light. It cost about 2 coppers to make. I sold it for 12 crowns a phial, in a dark green bottle, with a wax seal and a card that said, in an elegant hand, 1 dose only, and the buyer must not be told. Last line is the whole trick. That is the entire product. Not the liquid. The instruction. Because if you tell a woman that her man must not be told, then when he is warmer to her the next evening, she has already agreed with herself that she cannot ask him why. I sold 9,000 phials in the first year. I sold them to countesses. I sold them to a bishop, by post. I sold 4 to the same woman in 1 month and had to institute a limit, not for her sake, for mine, because I could not sleep. And I sold them, though I did not know it for a long time, to all 3 of the most powerful women on the continent, each of whom came to the broker separately, in secret, and each of whom would have died before admitting it. Saintess Talia bought one because the 9th choir was 6 weeks from dissolution and she had begun, in her exhaustion, to consider whether a small sin might buy a large mercy, and because she had convinced herself that if she owned it and never used it, she had not fallen. She kept it in her sleeve for 4 months and never opened it. She told me that herself, later, sitting on a step, in the worst hour of her life. Princess Naira bought 6, because she thought they were a human weapon of some kind and wanted her alchemists to take one apart. Her alchemists reported back that it was brandy. She laughed for a week and put the rest in a cupboard and, I am told, still gives them out at weddings. And Eliza von Blutrose bought 1. She came to Harrogate in the autumn of the 2nd year. Not for me. That is what I have to make you understand. She had no idea I was in that city. She came because the broker had bought the river frontage her grain went down, and her factor had failed to renegotiate the tariff 3 times, and the Duchess of Blutrose does not send a 4th factor. I found out she was coming 11 hours ahead, because I owned the customs house clerk in the way that you own a clerk who is grateful, which is the only durable way. I had 11 hours to leave that city and I did not leave it. Instead I put on a grey mask. The room over the rope makers had become a room over a warehouse with a long table in it. I sat at one end of that table with 2 of Asa's largest nephews standing behind me, and the door opened, and she came in. She had not changed. That was the first blow and I had not prepared for it. Some part of me had assumed that 2 years without me would have visibly cost her something, and it had not, and I had to sit with the fact that I had wanted it to. Then she sat down, and put her gloves on the table, and I saw that she had 2 fingers on her left hand strapped together under the glove leather, badly, the way you strap your own hand when you do not want a physician to write it down. You are the broker, she said. I am. My voice through that mask did not sound like me. That was the point of the mask, and I had practiced, and I still nearly did not manage the first sentence. You have my river. I have a lease on 7 wharves and the road behind them. Your Grace has a tariff dispute. I would like to resolve it quickly, because you frighten my staff. Good, she said. We negotiated for 2 hours. I want to tell you that I went easy on her. I did not. I have thought about it and the truth is that I fought her for every copper, because it was the first conversation in 2 years in which she did not know she was talking to a purchase. She was magnificent. She was better than her factors by an enormous distance, and she was better than me on 3 separate points, and twice she caught me out on grain tonnage and I had to concede in front of 2 of Asa's nephews. At the end of it we had a tariff, and it was fair, and neither of us was happy, which is how you know. She sat back. She looked at me across the table. Now the other thing, she said. There is no other thing. You sell a preparation, said Eliza von Blutrose. I did not move. Your Grace is misinformed. Green bottle. 12 crowns. A card that says the buyer must not be told. She said it in her flat, unhurried, price-reading voice, the one I had heard say 3 kingdoms in a stone room. My factor bought one in Sallow. He thought he was being thorough. He is a fool, but he is a thorough fool. I do not discuss that line of business. How much? Your Grace, how much, said Eliza, for one that works. Warehouse was very quiet. Somewhere below, a cart went past on the cobbles. There is no such thing, I said. I am aware. That stopped me completely. Then why are you asking? Because I have been to 9 people in 2 years, she said, and every one of them has told me there is no such thing, and I have come to a man in a mask in a warehouse in a port city, which is what you do after the 11th one. She was completely calm. Her hands were flat on the table. She had not raised her voice once in 2 hours and she did not raise it now. Would like to know the price, she said, of making a man come back. I could not speak. I want you to know that I sat there in a mask with my hands under the table and could not produce a single word. He is alive, she said, into the silence, because the silence had become an invitation and she took it, the way tired people do with strangers. That is the first thing I checked. I have not looked for him. He asked me not to look for him and I have not looked for him and I would like some credit for that, and there is nobody in my life I can ask for it from, so I am asking a man whose face I cannot see. Why did he go? She answered straight away, which told me she had answered it before, to herself, a great many times. Because I bought something, said Eliza. It was not his. It was not mine either. It belonged to a girl who had earned it, and I took the last 3 steps of her work away from her without noticing she was standing there, and I did it because he was worried and I cannot bear it when he is worried. It was kind. It was not kind, she said sharply. Do not do that. Everyone does that. It was not kind, it was convenient, and it was convenient because I have never in my life had to want anything for longer than it takes to send a letter. She picked up one of her gloves, turned it over once, and put it down again in exactly the same place, squared to the edge of the table. I am very good at obtaining things, she said. I have been doing it since I was 14 and I am better at it than anyone on this continent. And I have discovered, at some expense, that there is one category of object that the method does not work on, and it is the only category I have ever actually wanted anything from. So you want a potion, I said, from behind a gray mask, in a warehouse I owned, to the one person alive who could have identified my hands. I want to know the price, she said. That is all. I know there is no bottle. But everything has a price, and if a man tells me a price I can pay it, and I have been sitting up at night for 2 years without a number to work towards, and I would rather have a cruel number than no number at all. I took the mask off. I did not plan to. There was no calculation in it whatsoever, which is the only reason I can bear to tell this part. I put my hands up and took it off and set it on the table between us. She did not say anything for a long moment. Then she came around the end of that table, which took her 4 steps, and I counted all 4 of them, and she stopped a good deal closer than the conversation required. She put her hand flat against my jaw where the strap had been and left it there, checking the shape of my face against something she had been carrying for 3 years, and I have never in my life been so aware of standing still. You have a line here. It goes in an hour. I do not want it to go in an hour. Then she heard herself say it. The glacier came back up over her face like a shutter coming down, and she took her hand away and sat. Eliza von Blutrose did not move. She did not stand up. She did not make a sound. She sat there and looked at me across a table in a warehouse, and I watched 2 years go across her face in about 4 seconds. I have been in this city for 14 months, I said. Yes. 11 hours ride from your east gate. Yes. You never looked. No, said Eliza. Why not? And she said, with the mask lying between us on the table, because you asked me for something, and I have wanted somebody to ask me for something my entire life, and it turned out the thing you wanted was for me to do nothing, and I was not going to fail at the first one. I put my head in my hands. I sat like that for a while, in front of 2 of Asa's nephews, who to their eternal credit went out and shut the door. There is no price, I said, eventually. That is the answer to your question, and it is not a kind answer. There is no number. You cannot buy this one and you will never be able to buy this one, and every year you spend looking for the number is a year you spend not doing the thing that actually works. Which is what? Asking, I said. Out loud. Badly. Without knowing if the answer is yes. She did not answer straight away, and she did not look away either. I do not know how, said the blood rose. I know, I said. That is why I left. We talked until it was light. Not all of it was good. I told her about Harrogate, and the ice, and the salt road, and the 400 carts, and the copper, and, eventually, at about the 4th hour, when it was too late at night to keep anything, I told her about the fever. 3 days. The words in no language. The pieces in my head afterwards that had never fitted anywhere and had never once gone away. I told her about the thin lengths of potato and the hot fat and the salt straight away, and the printed sheet sold at a loss, and the ice and the sawdust, and how none of it was mine, exactly, and how I had spent 10 years unable to decide whether I was a lucky man or a haunted one. That is why the money, I said. It is not that I am clever. I am reasonably clever. It is that I remember a world where all of this was obvious, and I have been selling other people's obvious things to an empire that has not thought of them yet, and I have never had to invent anything. Liza listened to the whole thing without interrupting. Then she said, who else knows? The Saintess. She saw it. She did not write it down. And you told me. Yes. Why? Because you cannot buy it, I said, and you cannot fix it, and you cannot get to it before me and pay for it 3 days early. It is the only thing I have that is completely useless to you. Eliza von Blutrose put her face in her hands and laughed until she cried, and then stopped laughing and did not stop the other thing for some time. 3 things happened that winter, in the space of 9 days, and every one of them was somebody keeping a promise. The first was Wren. She published the composition of the preparation in the Proceedings of the Academy, under her own name, with an essay, a control series, and a 2-page discussion of the psychology of instruction that is still the most quietly savage thing I have ever read. Rose hip. Honey. Brandy. Powdered mica. And a card. The copper carried it on the front sheet, because I own the copper and because when Wren sent me the proof 6 days ahead, with a note that said print it or I go elsewhere, I sat with it for one night and then wrote back one word. Print. It cost me the entire line inside a month. 9,000 files a year, gone. It cost me rather more than that in reputation among people who had bought them and now had to look at each other. It also, and this is the part Wren had seen and I had not, saved my life. Because 6 days after that, the 9th Choir laid a charge of trafficking in illicit sacraments against a masked broker in Harrogate, which carries the collar and the road, and the charge died in the reading, because you cannot traffic in a sacrament that a published essay has demonstrated to be brandy. Wren did not tell me she was doing that. I asked her about it years later and she said, I was not doing it for you, I was doing it because it was true, which is the most Wren sentence ever constructed and is also, I am fairly certain, a lie. The second thing was Talia. The charge did not come out of nowhere. Somebody in the 9th Choir had a location, a description, and a wharf number, and the choir moved on it 6 days before the essay came out, which was very nearly 6 days too early for me. She came and told me herself. She walked into the warehouse, in the rain, without acolytes, and stood in front of the long table and said, I sold you. I know, I said. I did know. I owned a customs clerk. Choir gets the winter tithe. 42 houses. 11 of them will open again in the spring. She was shaking. My master will die in a bed. That is what I bought with you and I am not going to pretend the price was bad. Sit down, Talia. I am not going to sit down. She put something on the table. Green bottle. Wax seal. Unopened. I bought this in the summer. I have carried it in my sleeve for 4 months. I never used it and I never intended to use it and I want you to know that owning it was the worst thing I have ever done, which tells you everything about what kind of saintess I am. Did not fall. You bought brandy. I did not know it was brandy, said Talia. That is the entire point. I looked at her for a long moment. You came and told me, I said. Before anyone found out. You could have kept the tithe and the secret and I would never have known. Yes. Why? Because I can see souls, Leon, and I have to look at my own. She sat down after all, very suddenly, like her legs had made the decision. I have resigned the choir. This morning. They keep the tithe, they get the houses, and I do not get to be the person who arranged it. Talia, offer me the position, she said. I will take it. I have 42 houses and no tithe and I am not too proud to be paid. Then she named her own price, and it was not money. You will print what I did. Under my name, in the copper, in the same type as the rest of it. Not softened. If I am going to eat at your table I would like the people at the next one to know exactly who is doing it. The third thing that winter was that I found out where my money came from, and I did not find it out in a ledger. It walked in through the door of my own warehouse. Wren's essay had made me nervous about everything I had not personally checked, so I had started following my own money backwards instead of forwards. I had got as far as the factoring houses when one of them came to see me. The largest of them had taken up a little over a third of everything I ever issued. It had never asked a question, never haggled, and never once been late. In 2 years I had not met a single person from it. His name was Ostrek. He came to the warehouse in Harrogate at 3 in the morning, because that is when I worked, and he knew that, which was the first thing about him I did not like. Put a folded paper on a crate and did not open it. Another third, he said. Same terms. I did not ask for another third. No. Nobody offers those terms twice. No, he agreed, and he seemed pleased that I had said it. Then tell me what it is, because I have been taking that money for 2 years and calling myself clever, and I would like to stop. A man lends to make a profit, said Ostrek. We are not lending. Then what are you buying? Not the business. And he waited and let me walk to it myself, which I understood much later was a courtesy, and which at the time felt like being led to a window. Ashmere, I said. You are the Ashmere Consortium. You hold 12 mines in the north and 9 of them have been flooded for years, and a concern with 9 dead mines does not have a third of a continental fortune to lose on a potato cart. That is correct. Whose money is it? Chartered to a partnership. The partnership to a trust. Whose name is on the trust? The Dowager Princess Maria, said Ostrek. Mother of the second prince. It is not her money either. Then whose? You are asking the wrong question, and you have asked it wrong for 2 years. Ask what we want. What do you want? The northern wharves kept clear through the winter. And no manifest have been asked for a great many things by a great many people. That is the only request that has ever made me cold in a warm room. And if I say no, then we are lending, he said, and you will learn what our terms actually are. He left the folded paper on the crate. I did not open it for an hour. When I did, it was a note of credit for more money than I had ever seen written down, with no conditions on it at all, which is the most expensive thing anybody has ever handed me. I went to Aldrich. I told her that night, because I had learned that much. I put the note of credit on the table between us and I told her what Ostrek had asked for, and she read the paper twice and never once touched it. Then she said, "Let me look at them." It came out flat and slightly wrong, the way a sentence does when somebody has rehearsed it in a corridor. I can have that trust in pieces in 9 days. I am asking. I would like you to notice that I am asking. I said no. I said it kindly, which was worse. I said that the hour a Blutrose rider went near that trust they would know precisely who had sent him, and that I had built every part of this so that nothing in it carried her name, and that this was the entire point of it. All of that was true, and none of it is why I remember the evening. It was the first time in her life she had asked for a thing instead of buying it, and the man who taught her the word said no and went back to his ledgers. She said, "Very well," and squared the paper to the edge of the table, and did not raise it again until a stable yard in the rain, where she did not ask at all. I want you to appreciate what that cost me. I had not spoken to the man since he stood up in a lit hall and paid for an advocate to argue that I was property, and I rode 4 days to sit in his mother's freezing morning room and ask him to look at a page of accounts. He looked at it for 20 minutes without saying anything. Then he said, "This is not my mother's money." No. She has been solvent for 2 years. She told me she had refinanced. He put the page down very carefully, the way you put down something you would like to throw. I asked her twice. I asked her whose money and she told me it was the consortium's and I did not press, because pressing my mother is expensive and I was tired. Your Highness, Aldrich. He looked up. If you are about to tell me my mother sold the northern iron to men she did not identify, you may as well use my name while you do it. I do not think she sold it, I said. I think they gave it to her. I think they have been giving money to a great many people for a long time, and I think the only thing they have ever wanted in exchange is to be nobody. And you? A third of everything I have built is theirs, I said. They came in the first month. Before there was anything to invest in. Found a masked man in a port city with a hand cart and 7 wharves and they gave him more capital than the Imperial Treasury lends in a year, at a rate that guarantees they lose money, and they have never once asked me for a decision. Aldrich was silent for a moment. They were not buying your business, he said. No. What were they buying? That, I said, is the 4-day ride I have not made yet. My father was living in a rented room above a farrier's in Ord, on an allowance I had been paying him for 2 years through a factor so that neither of us had to write a letter. He had a chair by the window and a bad chest and a coat that had once been green velvet. He had spent his allowance on the coat, in the first month, and had been cold ever since, and if you want to know Corvin Vance in one fact, that is the fact. There he is, he said, when I came in. He said it exactly the way he had said it in the courtyard in the rain. There he is. Sit down, sit down. You will want the good chair, there is only the one. I did not sit down. 15 years ago, I said, you sold me. I want the name of the buyer. Ah. He smiled at the window. Now that is a valuable piece of information. Yes, very valuable. Possibly the last valuable thing I have got. He turned his head and looked at me, and his eyes were exactly the same as they had been across every table of my childhood, alive and quick and completely without flaw. So we are back where we started, are we not, boy? You want a thing that is mine and we must discuss what it is worth. I had prepared 6 speeches on the road, and you should know that. I had a speech about my mother. I had a speech about the pump gallery in Marlow and what a man's signature does to a child. I had one where I cried, which I had practiced, Which is the most humiliating fact in this entire account. I looked at him in the bad chair in the cold room and I understood that every single one of those speeches was a thing he could win. So I did the one thing I have ever been reliably good at. 4,000 crowns, I said. He blinked. What? 4,000 crowns for the name and the paper. Cash, today, through the farrier, who will hold it? I have it downstairs. I kept my voice completely level. That is my first and only offer, and it is 4 times what you sold me for, and I would like you to notice that I have finally made you a profit. My father looked at me for a long moment. And then, very slowly, he began to laugh, and the laugh turned into the cough, and the cough went on for a while. You are mine after all, he said, when he could. Everyone always said you took after her. You do not. Look at you. The name, Corvin. There was no name, he said. That is what you have written 4 days for and it is the truth, so do not make a face. 3 men came to the mill town in the year you were 6. They did not give names. They were not looking for a boy, they were looking for a boy who had been sick, and they went to every house where a child had had the brain fever and lived. The room went a long way away, the way rooms do when somebody says a thing that quietly rearranges your entire childhood. They did not want a servant, he said. They wanted first refusal. That is the phrase they used, boy, first refusal, like I was selling them a horse before the fair. 200 crowns down in the balance on collection, and the paper said the balance was payable when they came for the thing described. The thing described. That was the wording. He said it without a flicker. I did not write it. I signed it. And when they did not come, they came, said my father. Twice. Once when you were 9 and once when you were 14, and both times I told them you had died of the coughing sickness in the winter, and both times they went away, and both times I did not sleep for a month. He looked back out of the window. So there is a thing I did for you. You may put it against the rest of the account however you like. I stood in that room for a long time. Why did you tell them I was dead? Because they had already paid the 200, said Corvin Vance, and if I gave you up I would never have been able to sell you again. That is the answer. I want it written down exactly, because for 2 years afterwards people asked me about my father and I gave them softer versions, and the softer versions are all lies. He was not protecting me. He had a stock and he did not intend to liquidate it. Do you know what they were? I said. I know that when the tall one talked, the horses would not stand, said my father. I know I have never in my life wanted so badly to be somewhere else. And I know that when I burned the balance of that paper, it did not burn, so I put it in the wall and I have not looked at it since, and if you want it, it is in the wall, and you may have it with the rest for the 4,000 paid him. That belongs in the record too. I could have taken the paper out of the wall myself in 10 minutes. He was 61 and could not have stopped me. I paid him 4,000 crowns for a piece of parchment out of his own wall, in cash, through the farrier, and I made him count it, because the alternative was to be a man who takes things from his father, and I have spent my whole life avoiding being the second Vance in a room. He counted it twice. He looked pleased. You will come back, he said, at the door. When you have got over yourself. Boys do. No, I said. Well, said my father. There it is. He did not apologize. Not that day, not any day, and he had a great deal of time in which he could have. The paper did not burn. I tried, on the road, on the second night, out of pure superstition. It sat in the fire and it was a piece of dry parchment in a fire and it did not take, and I fished it out with a stick and it was not even warm. On the back, under the seal, in an ink that had not faded in 15 years, there were 4 words in a hand I did not know. The vessel is prepared. I did not go home. I did not have to. Home came to the 3rd coaching stop on the North Road and was standing in the yard when I brought the horse in. A traveling coat, 2 riders, no luggage. Margit told you. Margit tells me everything. It is the most expensive loyalty in the Empire and I recommend it. She looked at my face for a while. You have found them. Ashmere. It runs up through a trust to the Dowager, and it does not stop there. Then I will buy Ashmere, said Eliza. Just like that, in a stable yard, in the rain, the way another woman offers to carry a bag. With what? The Southern holdings and the salt. 9 days. Here is the thing I have never been able to explain to anybody, including myself, at the time or since. She was right. It would have worked. 9 days, and 400 men would never have left the North, and 2 people who were mine would be alive today. I said no. Not for a reason I can be proud of. I said it because I had spent 2 years building the only thing on this earth that was mine, and had just learned that a third of it was bought for me before I started, and I could not stand to be handed the ending as well. It is money, she said. It is only ever money. It is not, and you know it is not, because you have never once let anybody buy you out of anything in your life. That landed. I watched it land. Then what will you do? Go north and look in the mines. Alone. Yes. That is stupid. It is, I agreed. It is also mine. She did not argue. That should have frightened me more than anything else that winter. What she did instead was stand very straight in a wet yard and ask me for something, which she had been practicing all year and was still terrible at. I want one condition. Say it. You told me to ask instead of buying. I have been asking. Now you do the same thing back. She took a breath. Nothing about you gets decided without me in the room. Not for my sake. Because I will not be told afterwards again. Agreed, I said. I meant it when I said it, and that is not a defense, and I am not offering it as one. Say it properly. Nothing about me without you in the room. Good, said the Duchess of Blutrose, and got back on her horse and went home, and I broke it inside of 2 days. My reasoning deserves the truth, because everybody who tells the story tells it as though I made a noble decision, and what I actually made was a calculation, and the calculation was wrong. I reasoned as follows. Men who bought me want me. They have spent 15 years and a fortune not finding me, and now, through Ashmere, they have found me, and they have been patiently buying me a business so that the thing described would grow up rich, visible, and easy to collect. Therefore they will come for me. Therefore the safest place for every person I care about is a long way from me. Therefore I went north, alone, to Ashmere, to see what was in the 9 flooded mines. And I wrote her a letter. I wrote it in a coaching inn and I sent it by the fastest rider I could hire, and it said, in full, they have been buying me since I was 6. It is me they want and it has always been me. I am going north to the mines. Do not come. If you come they will have both of us and I will have spent my whole life being a thing that costs you something. Please. This is me asking. I have thought about that letter every day since. Not the words. The words were true and I would write them again. The mistake was in the last 5, and the mistake was that I knew exactly what I was doing when I wrote them, and I used them, because I had learned in that stone room 2 years earlier that she would do anything at all if it was asked instead of taken. I asked her not to come, and she did not come, and that is the whole of it. They did not come for me. They went to the house. I have pieced it together from 9 accounts and I still cannot make it hold still, so I am going to tell you what Margaret told me, in the kitchen, 4 days later, in her flat announcing voice, because hers is the version that does not shake. They came in the 3rd hour after midnight. Not a grain cart. Nothing so clever. 400 men out of the north, paid in coin that had come through 6 honest hands before it reached them, which is why the imperial roads had let them pass in company strength. With them, 3 of the ones who do not give names. The ward stones held for 40 minutes. They are keyed to blood and intent, and the men in the yard intended a great deal, and the stones did what they were built for and then they burst. There were 39 people in that house. 9 of them could fight. 1 of them could fight the way she can. What the Duchess of Blutrose did at the front doors, Margaret would not tell me. She said it was not hers to give away, and that the woman it belonged to was 2 floors up and awake, and that I could go and ask her like a grown man. Every one of the 39 went down that drain except 11, who would not go, and 2 of those 11 did not come back up. Their names were Tobin and Alice. He looked after the horses. She was the girl of 16 who had brought me a tray with a rose pressed into the butter, except that by then she was 19 and ran the still room and had been teaching herself to read out of the copper. I paid for both of those. Not in the sense that I feel responsible. In the literal sense. The men who killed them were paid with money I made selling potatoes, and I can trace the coin, and I have. They took the east wing and the long hall and the room with the glass dome in it. What happened in that yard at the 5th hour I did not get from Margaret either, and I am going to put it further down, where it happened to me, instead of here, where it only happened. Talia arrived at dawn. She had no order. She had resigned it 12 days before, publicly, in front of the choir, and she had spent the interval sleeping in a hostel in Harrogate and working out what a person is when the thing they were is gone. She rode through the night on a hired horse because the copper printed a 2-line notice at the 2nd hour, off a rider from the estate, and she read it at a coaching stop. She could not fight. She had never been able to fight. What she could do, and what nobody in the Empire could do better, was look at a thing and say what it was, and she stood in that yard in the grey light and named all 3 of the ones without names, out loud, in the old tongue, and being named is intolerable to them. That is what broke the assault. Not power. Bookkeeping. A tired woman with no job saying what things were. Aldrich came at noon with 200 of his own. He had ridden from the capital when the same notice reached him, and he had not asked his mother, and he had not asked the crown, and he arrived at the head of 200 men in a private capacity, which in imperial law is treason, and he did it anyway, and he did it for a woman who had refused him in front of 400 people. On the other side of the continent, without knowing any of it, Princess Nyra of the Ashfold closed the serrated pass. Her reason was commercial. Ashmere had tried to buy salt in bulk through a factor and she had smelled it. She shut the pass on a Tuesday, which stranded 1,100 northern mercenaries 3 weeks from their pay and, incidentally, made the Ashfold Council furious enough to begin the process that eventually took her father's crown. She did not know she was saving anything. She was protecting a margin. I have never let her forget it and she has never once let me thank her. I came back on the 4th day. I had been in a flooded mine, on a rope, in the dark, 300 miles away, when the fastest rider Ren Marlowe could hire found me, and I do not remember the ride back at all. I have tried. There is nothing there. The east wing was gone. The long hall had no roof. There were 14 horses in the front court because the stables had burned and nobody had anywhere to put them, and a man I did not know was walking one of them up and down as though it were an ordinary morning. Margaret met me on the steps. She looked exactly as she always looked. She is alive, she said, before I could ask. She is upstairs. She is awake. Mr. Vance, before you go up, I am going to tell you 3 things and you are going to stand still for them. I stood still. 1. She lost the arm below the elbow. It is not going to grow back and there is no working left in the empire that can put it back, and if you go up there and offer to buy one, I will put you out of this house myself. Margaret. 2. Tobin and Alice are in the chapel. You will go and look at them before you go upstairs, because they were yours as much as hers and you do not get to skip it. Yes. 3. And for the first time in 3 years, that woman's voice moved. Nobody in this house blames you. Not one person. I have listened for it and it is not there. There are 22 people below stairs who think you are the reason any of them are alive, because you showed them a drain, and they are going to say so to your face, and I am telling you now so that you do not embarrass yourself when they do. I went to the chapel. That is not going into this account. Then I went upstairs. She was sitting up in a chair by the window, not in bed, because of course she was. Her left sleeve was pinned. Her face was gray and her hair was down and there was a bowl of something beside her that she had not touched. She saw me in the doorway and the first thing she said, before anything else, was, I did not come. I know. You asked me not to come and I did not come. Her voice was thin and absolutely steady. Leon. I want to be certain you understand that I kept it. When the notice went out I had 30 riders in the yard within the hour and I sent them all north to find you, and then I stood in my own hall and I did not go after you, and that is why I was here when they came. Crossed the room and I went down on the floor next to that chair, which is not a thing I do. I know, I said. What did you do, I said. After you did not go after me. Is that a question you want answered? Yes. Very well. The ward stones went at 40 minutes. There were 39 people in this house and 9 of them could fight, and not one of the 9 could fight what was standing in the yard. So I went out of the front doors, alone. Yes. Eliza. It is the stupidest thing a person can do, and it is also the only thing that buys 40 minutes, she said, in the voice she keeps for laundry lists, and 40 minutes is a kitchen going down a drain that you showed them. And then one of the 3 put a hand on me, and I did not step back, because behind me was the kitchen stair and there were still 4 people on it. She considered the pinned sleeve the way you consider a line in somebody else's accounts. I kept it between them and the stair for as long as I had one. There is nothing to say to that. I have had 4 years and I still have nothing. What I did at the time was ask the only question I had left. Would you do it again? Obviously, said the Duchess of Blutrose. I want you to say I did well, said the Duchess of Blutrose. I am aware of how that sounds. I have been sitting here for 4 days waiting to say it to somebody and there is nobody else I can say it to. Put my forehead against her knee and I could not speak for some time. You did well, I said, eventually. Good, she said. And then, in exactly the same flat voice, without any change at all, they took the handkerchief. I looked up. The glass is broken and the plinth is there and the cloth is gone, said Eliza. They took the plate and the lamp fittings and everything with metal in it, and the cloth was in the way, so it went with the rest, and I have had 4 days to decide whether that matters, and I have not been able to. It matters. It is a rag, Leon. It matters, I said. She was quiet. I have been very stupid, she said. For a long time. I want to say the specific thing and not a general apology, because I have learned that from you, and it is the only useful thing anybody has ever taught me. Say it. I thought that if I paid for everything, nothing could ever be taken. She looked out of the window at a courtyard with 14 horses in it and no stable. That was the whole of it. That is my entire philosophy of life, from the age of 8, and it is not sophisticated, and it does not work, and the proof of it is in the chapel. She turned her head and looked at me. What is in the mines, she said. Because she is who she is. 4 days, 1 arm, 2 people in the chapel, and the first practical question out of her mouth was the right one. An army, I said. 1,100 northern mercenaries at the top end and about 9,000 levies underneath, and a great deal of iron, and something at the bottom of the 9th shaft that I saw for 11 seconds on a rope in the dark and that I will not describe until I have eaten. Whose money? Mine, I said. All of it. Every crown. They gave it to me so I would grow, and I grew, and I paid them 35% of everything I made for 2 years, and they bought this with it. I said the number out loud because she is the only person alive who deserved it straight. I paid for the men who took your arm, I said. Eliza von Blutrose considered that for a moment. Then she reached over with her right hand and took hold of the front of my shirt and pulled, and I got up off the floor, and she put her forehead against mine. Good, she said. Good. You bought them once, said Eliza. Buy them again. Here is what nobody tells you about a holy war. It is a payroll. Everybody imagines the god. Everybody imagines the shadow over the mountains and the thing at the bottom of the 9th shaft, and I saw that thing for 11 seconds on a rope in the dark, and I am not going to describe it, because describing it is what it wants. But a god cannot hold a road. 1,100 northern mercenaries hold a road. 9,000 levies out of drowned villages hold a road, and they hold it because on the last day of every month somebody counts coins into their hands. I know exactly who was counting. I had been sending him the money for 2 years, so I did not raise an army. The empire could not raise an army. The treasury was 4 months behind on its own garrisons, and the Dowager Princess Maria's faction, which held the northern iron, had spent the winter discovering where its refinancing had come from. I did the one thing I know how to do. I bought theirs. It took 9 days, and it is the single finest piece of work of my life, and I am going to describe it quickly because the good part is not the mechanism. Mercenary companies of the North are chartered. They have articles. The articles say, in every one of them, that a company may accept a superior offer at the turn of a month provided that the standing employer is given notice and provided that no engagement is broken in the field. The clause is 400 years old. It exists because companies got tired of employers going bankrupt. Nobody had ever used it at scale, because nobody had ever had enough money to buy 1,100 men in 9 days. I did. I sold the salt road, all of it, every wharf and cart yard and river frontage between the serrated pass and the sea, to a syndicate of 9 Harrogate merchants who knew exactly how badly I needed cash and priced me accordingly, and I signed it in one afternoon without arguing about a single term. I sold the ice. I sold 400 carts. I sold the copper in 19 cities, and I sold it to Wren Marlowe for 1 crown, in writing, with a clause that says she may never sell it to anybody who would put a name in the corner of the front sheet. She tried to refuse. I made her take it. It is the only time I have ever won an argument with that woman, and I won it by being faster with the pen. And I sold my quarter of every remaining thing to Princess Nyra of the Ashfold, who paid in salt, at a rate that we both knew was theft, and who wrote at the bottom of the contract, in her own hand, in her own language, a line she has never agreed to translate. 9 days. Every crown I had ever made, and about 40,000 more that Aldrich raised against his mother's estate without her permission. On the last day of the month, 1,100 northern mercenaries gave lawful notice to the Ashmere Consortium and stood down. They did not change sides. That is the part people always get wrong when they tell it. They did not fight for me. They went home, because they were paid to go home, and a road held by nobody is just a road. The offer came the night before. I was in a farmhouse 6 miles from the shaft head, with a map and a candle and Aldrich asleep in a chair, and I looked up and there was somebody standing on the other side of the table who had not come in through the door. I will not describe it. It was not tall. It was extremely polite. You have spent everything, it said. Yes, it will not be enough. There are 9,000 levies who are not chartered and who will not be leaving, and they will take the Shaft Head Road in 3 days, and after that there is nothing between us and the capital but weather. Probably. We have a proposal. It put something on the table. A strip of parchment. I recognized the seal, because I had one exactly like it in my coat. Come with us. Freely. The thing described, presenting itself. The levies disperse the same hour, the mines are abandoned, the north is left as it was, and not one further person dies. This is not a threat and I am not permitted to make it a threat. It is an offer, and it is honest, and you may verify every part of it. And here is the horror of that night, which I have never been able to explain properly to anybody who was not in that room. It was true, every word. I checked it 4 different ways over the following 2 hours, and I have checked it in the years since with people who know, and the offer was exactly what it said it was. One man, walking north, and nobody else dies. Not Aldrich's 200. Not the levies, who were farmers 3 years ago. Not the 37 people left in a house with no roof. A price. A real one, clearly stated, payable in full. I sat with that candle until it went out and I want to tell you I never considered it and I considered it for 4 hours. What stopped me was not courage. I have been very clear about my courage. What stopped me was that I finally understood what I had been doing for 3 years, and what she had been doing for 10, and that they were the same thing. Buy the problem. Pay the price. Remove the worry. Do not tell either of them. If I had walked north out of that farmhouse, the last act of my life would have been to reach 3 days ahead of everybody I loved and settle their account without asking. I would have died being my father's son and her husband in the worst possible sense, and every person I did it for would have spent the rest of their lives inside a fence I had paid for. No, I said. Consider it further. I have considered it, I said. I decline the offer. Get out of my farmhouse. It went. Politely. And in the morning I found out what my father had done. Corvin Vance had ridden north on his own 6 days before, with the coat and the cough, and had presented himself at the Ashmere shaft head as the men who held the original bill of sale. He had a paper. He had had it made in Ord by a forger he had known for 30 years, and it was, by all accounts, beautiful work. It said that the thing described had been sold on, in the year of the second sale, to a house in the south. It said the claim had passed. It said, with 4 separate false attestations, that the balance was owed elsewhere and that the Ashmere claim was stale. It was rubbish. It would not have survived 10 minutes in front of the chamber, and my father, who understood paper better than any man I have ever met, knew that perfectly well. But they were not the chamber. They were creatures who had waited 15 years for a delivery, and who had built their entire enterprise on the proposition that a thing bought is a thing owned, and the one argument in the world they were constitutionally unable to dismiss was a competing claim. They spent 4 days on it. 4 days of a war, while 9,000 levies sat in the wet and were not paid, arguing about the priority of bills. That is what my father bought me. 96 hours, with a forgery, against something that could not be lied to about anything except property. They worked it out on the 4th day. In a lit hall 2 years before, a piece of paper had beaten me outright and I had no answer to it at all. I want it understood that this one beat nobody. It bought 4 days, and then it lost, and everything that mattered after it was done with water. I got the coat back. There was not anything else. I have thought for years about what to say about Corvin Vance, and I have arrived at this and no further. He did not do it to save me. I do not believe that, and I will not pretend to. He did it because for the whole of his life the only thing he had ever been good at was the moment at a table where a man puts down a card he should not have, and he had never once in 61 years been able to do it for anything that mattered. He wanted to be a man about whom somebody would say that he had done something. Somebody does. Every year, in a chapel with no roof, in front of 2 other stones. It is not the sentence he would have chosen, and he does not get to choose it. That morning I did up her sleeve for her. She had been managing it with her teeth in one hand for 3 weeks and managing it badly, and she let me, because we were riding in an hour and there was no time left to be proud about it. Takes longer than you would think, a pinned sleeve. Nobody tells you that. I stood close enough to feel her breathing change twice, and she did not remark on it, and neither did I. Thank you, she said, and then at once, do not look pleased. I am not pleased. You are extremely pleased. I am going to be pleased about this for the rest of my life, and there is nothing you can buy that will stop me. She made a sound that in anyone else would have been a laugh. I told her about the offer before we rode. I want that on the record, because I broke her one condition once and it cost her an arm, and this was the first chance I had to keep it, and I very nearly did not. I told her in a farmhouse kitchen with the map still on the table. All of it. That it was honest. That I had verified it 4 ways. That one man walking north buys every other life on that road. That I had sat with it for 4 hours. She listened the way she reads accounts. Then she said, 4 hours. Yes. You considered it for 4 hours and you are telling me now. I am telling you before. The road is tomorrow. That is not the same as before and you know it is not. She was right, and I said so, and that is the closest the two of us have ever come to an argument we both won. Why did you decline it? Because walking north is me settling everybody's account 3 days ahead without asking. I have watched 2 people do that my whole life. One of them forged a bill in Ord and the other one is standing in this kitchen. You want me to say you did well? No. Good. I was not going to. She put her hand flat on the map. Tell me the rest of it tomorrow. Tell me the parts that frighten you first, and not last, because you put them last. So I did it that night, with the lamp out and my back to her, because it turns out that after 4 years I was still not brave enough to do it with my face showing. I started with the oldest one. I said the sentence I had failed to say in the rain outside that warehouse, in the words I had rehearsed and not used. I was leaving you. I got lucky. 2 men are dead because a beacon you hid in my clothes went off in a cellar. She did not tell me it was all right, and she did not tell me she had worked it out years ago, which is what I had been quietly counting on. She said 4 years in the voice she keeps for numbers, and then said nothing at all for a while. Then, the next one you keep, you will bring me inside the week. That is what it costs. I am aware that is not enough. I am asking for it anyway, which is the only thing I have ever managed to learn. The Shaft Head Road, the last day. I want to correct the songs, because there are 4 of them now and every one of them is wrong in the same direction. There was no duel. Nobody fought a god. There were 9,000 cold, unpaid, badly led farmers holding a road, and 200 of Aldrich's regulars, and 9 of the Blutrose household who would not stay behind, and a former saintess with no order who stood on a cart and named things out loud until she could not stand any more. Talia was on that cart because Eliza asked her. I did not learn that until afterwards, which is the entire point of it. No money went. No rider with a purse. No offer of a position in a household. She had written one line to a woman with no order and no title, sleeping in a hostel in Harrogate, and the line said please, which is a word she had learned from a letter that cost her an arm. I did not pay her, she said, when I finally asked. I asked her. And then, because she is who she is, it is a new thing and I am not good at it yet. It was the only thing done on that road that day that nobody had asked her to do. And the thing at the bottom of the 9th shaft came up the shaft. It came up because it had no army, no money, no claim, and no vessel, and it had to do the work itself, and the entire point of that creature is that it has spent 400 years arranging never to do the work itself. Eliza was beside me. Not behind me. Not above me on a hill. Not in a hedge with a 9th circle casting metered and pre-authorized. She had one arm. She had ridden 4 days on it. And when we came up onto the spoil heap and I said, out loud, in front of Aldrich and 9 of her own people, I need the north face open for 90 seconds and I need you to do nothing else, whatever happens, whatever you see, she said. Yes. That is all. One word. From a woman who had spent 10 years arranging the world so that nobody ever had to ask her. She opened the north face and she held it for 90 seconds and she did not do one single thing more, and twice in that 90 seconds I went down and she did not come, because I had asked her not to. And I have never been so frightened for another person's soul as I was for hers in that minute and a half. What I did with the 90 seconds was open a sluice. 9 of the 12 Ashmere mines were flooded. They had been flooded for years. Shaft Head sits at the bottom of a valley and the 9th shaft is the lowest working in the north, and I had been down it on a rope, in the dark, for 11 seconds, and the only thing I had brought back up was a survey. I did not fight it. I am a man with no magic and a head full of somebody else's obvious things. I drowned it. The elixir was the last part and I would like to be unromantic about it. There is a bank above the 9th shaft head, and it had to come down from the top, and there was nobody at the top, because Aldrich's men were holding the road and Eliza was holding the north face and Talia was on a cart, and there was one person available. 3 kingdoms, in a pink bottle, poured down the throat of a chained boy who was entirely certain he was being murdered for sport. I went up the bank and I brought it down and something that should have ended me struck me in the middle of it, and I got up, because for one single event in one single life I was a man who could not be ended. I got up, and the bank went, and the water went down into the 9th shaft, and it went on going down for 2 days and most of a night. When they carried me off the spoil heap I was an ordinary mortal man again, and I have been one ever since. For what it is worth, the sensation of the elixir leaving is exactly like the sensation of putting down something heavy that you had forgotten you were holding. I woke up 4 days later in a house with no roof, in a room that had a roof, which Margit had arranged by the simple method of taking the roof off another room. I had no money, none. That is not a figure of speech and it is not modesty. I had sold the salt road, the ice, the carts, the copper, and my quarter of everything, and the last of the cash had gone north in coin boxes to 1,100 men who went home. 25 years old, the largest fortune ever assembled by a commoner in that empire, and the balance was 4 crowns, a horse I did not own, and a coat that had been my father's. I lay there and did the sum, because that is all I have ever been good at, and the sum came out at nothing, and I do not think I have ever felt so light. Naira came in the 3rd week. She had taken her father's crown in the interval, more or less by accident, in the way that other people acquire a cold. She was wearing it badly and she had brought her own chair because she did not trust ours. Right, she said. Business. I am opening the Ashfold to human settlement for the first time in 200 years, I need somebody to run the Eastern administration, and I have decided it is you. Naira, do not interrupt, this is the good part. She put a folder on the bed. A name. A real one, entered in our registry, not a false one. Land at the head of the pass. A ship at Harrogate on the 9th of next month, which will take you and anyone you name, and after that you are an Ashfold subject and your empire cannot reach you for any debt, claim, marriage, or paper, including one signed by a man who is dead. I opened the folder. It was real. Every page. She had had it drawn by her own counsel and sealed twice, and there was a ship, and I checked afterwards and the ship existed and sailed on the 9th. Why, I said. Because you are the only human I have ever liked and you are about to spend the rest of your life in a wet country as a kepman with a famous nickname, said the Queen of the Ashfold. And because I would like it on the record that I offered. She stood up. And I want something for it, she said, at the door, because I am not a charity and you would not trust it if I were. First refusal on the Southern Salt, for 9 years, at the rate we had before any of this. Say yes or say no, but say one of them tonight. I lay there for 2 days with an open door on the blanket in front of me. Then I got up, and I took the 4 crowns and the horse I did not own, and I rode to Harrogate, and everybody in that house was extremely careful not to ask me what I was doing. I did not go to the ship. I went to the thieves' market on the East Dock, which is where everything looted out of a great house in a bad winter comes to be sold 4 months later, and I stood in it for 9 days. It was in a barrow with tin plate and door fittings and a broken lamp bracket, wrapped around a set of curtain rings so the rings would not rattle. Frayed. Filthy in the specific permanent way that cloth gets when blood has dried in it and been washed badly and dried again. The men wanted 1.5 crowns for the rings. I told him I only wanted the rag. He looked at me. He looked at the rag. And he did the thing that every trader on that dock does, which is that the moment he understood I wanted it, the price went up. 4 crowns. Everything I had. For a piece of cloth I had wiped my hands on when I was 11 years old. I paid it without arguing, which is the only purchase of my entire life that I have never once regretted or recalculated, and then I walked 110 miles home because I did not have the coach fare. She was in the ruined long hall when I came in, standing on a trestle, directing 4 men in a hoist, with her sleeve pinned and her hair tied back the way you tie hair back when you intend to do something with your hands. She saw me and came down off the trestle badly, one-handed, and the 4 men very sensibly went somewhere else. You went to Harrogate, she said. Yes. Naira told me about the ship. Her voice was completely level. I want you to know that I did not send anybody. I did not have you watched. I have spent 9 days in this hall not knowing, and it was worse than the 4 days after the yard, and I did it, and I am telling you because I would like it counted. It is counted. The ship sailed this morning. I know, I said. I took the handkerchief out of my coat and held it out. She looked at it. She did not take it. She stood there with her one hand at her side and looked at a filthy piece of grey cloth for what felt like a very long time. Where? She said. East Dock. Thieves' Market. It was wrapped round a set of curtain rings. How much? Ask me properly. How much did it cost you? Said Eliza von Blutrose. 4 crowns, I said. Which was everything I had, and I would like to point out that I have now paid more for that rag than you paid for me, and I intend to be insufferable about it for the rest of my life. He made a sound. It was not a laugh. It was not the other thing either. Now you, I said. Now me what? How much is it worth? And she opened her mouth, because that woman has never in her life been asked what a thing is worth and failed to answer inside a second, and she has an instinct for it the way other people have an instinct for balance. Nothing came out. I watched the Duchess of Blutrose stand in her own ruined hall and try, honestly and with real effort, to name a price, and fail, and go on failing, and finally close her mouth. "I do not know," she said. "Good," I said. "Then I will. I want to tell you that I had it prepared. I had 4 years and 110 miles of walking, and I had nothing prepared at all, and what came out badly and in the wrong order, and I would not change a word of it. It is worth 1 question a day," I said. "That is the price. Every day, for the rest of your life, you have to ask me for one thing out loud, before you buy it, before you arrange it, before you get 3 days ahead of me and settle it. One thing. Badly, if you like. Not knowing whether I will say yes." She did not move. "And I will do the same," I said, "because I have spent 3 years being exactly the same animal as you with a smaller budget, and I nearly walked north out of a farmhouse to pay everybody's bill without asking, and I would have called it love the whole way there." "Leon." "That is the price," I said. "It is not money, and you cannot pay it in 1 installment, and there is no way to pay it early. Do you want it?" Eliza von Blutrose, who had bought a boy for 900 crowns and freed him the same day and then waited 10 years without ever once saying so, looked at me across the wreck of her house. And she said the 4 words she had been avoiding since she was 8 years old. "Yes. Please. Marry me." Which, if you are keeping score, means that she asked, and I said yes, and that is the entire moral of a 4-year story about the most expensive people in the empire. The wedding was in the spring, in the long hall, which had a roof by then because 37 people and 20 of Aldrich's soldiers had put one on it. Leah performed it. She had no order, no standing, and no authority whatsoever, and Eliza had 9 bishops' offers on her desk and picked the unemployed one, and that is the most decisively I have ever seen that woman spend nothing. Ren came. She sat at the back and cried and denied it afterwards, and she has since taken the chair and applied thalmic assay, which she got with her own numbers, and the copper still costs 1 copper and there is still nobody's name in the corner. Aldrich gave a speech. It was terrible. He is a fine soldier and a worse public speaker, and he ended it by saying that if he had been born 8 streets over he expected we would have got on, and then had to sit down quickly. Naira sent 6 barrels of the dreadful liquor and a note that said, "In full, I told you." Margaret did not attend, because somebody had to run the kitchen, which is a lie, and everybody knew it was a lie, and nobody said so. Now the last part, because I promised at the beginning that this was a story about being sold and I would like to close the account. I woke up the morning after the wedding in the best bed I have ever slept in a room with a roof I had helped carry, next to a woman who had been sitting on the steps of a merchant house in a bloody dress the first time I ever saw her, and there was a weight on my left ankle. I sat up. It was gold. Fine work, quite beautiful actually, about the thickness of a bootlace, running from a cuff on my ankle to the bedpost. Eliza was already awake. Of course she was. She was lying there with her chin propped on her hand, watching me with an expression of complete and undefended happiness that I had seen exactly once before, in the rain, over a paper cone of fried potatoes. "Just in case, darling," she said. I looked at the chain. I looked at the woman. A younger man would have panicked. A younger man would have thought about butchers. "How much?" I said. "What? How much did it cost?" She hesitated, which I enjoyed enormously. 1,200 crowns, said the Duchess of Blutrose. Right. I lay back down. "You are going to sell it, and you are going to give half of what you get to the school in Marlow, and the other half you are going to keep in a box, and every time you want to do something like this you are going to take a coin out of the box and put it on my desk and ask me first." There was a pause. "That is a terrible system," said my wife. "That is today's question," I said. "Ask me properly." And she did. Badly, in the wrong order, not knowing whether I would say yes. I said yes. I nearly always say yes. That was never the point, and it never has been.
The moment worth stopping on is easy to miss. A man who once held the largest fortune on the continent stands in a thieves' market and pays 4 crowns for a filthy scrap of cloth wrapped around curtain rings. He does not buy it for her. He buys it so that he can be asked what it is worth, and so that she has to admit she cannot say. Everything these two got wrong for 10 years lives in that gap. She believed a thing paid for quickly enough could never be taken, and paid so well she nearly bought away the last 3 steps of other people's lives, including a girl who had earned her own 940 crowns and deserved to reach the counter herself. He believed the opposite, that anything given to him made him smaller, and was so proud of owing nothing he almost walked north alone to settle every account with his own body and call it devotion. They were the same animal. What broke it was not the war, the money, or the arm she lost in her own front yard. She never did name a figure for that rag. It sits in a drawer, and he has never told her what he would take for it, and he does not intend to.